Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Seeing his wife wrapping half a meat pie in towels, Charles asked unhappily, "Who are you going to feed again?" "Oh, relax. I just wanted to give him a treat." Adriana cut him off and glared menacingly. "You should have left it to me instead of giving it to strangers. I'm going to put you on a starvation ration. You've lost your conscience. Do you know who this is for? And you'll still be like an old tractor. She shouldn't be living off us," Charles shrugged. "I'm gonna get my ear. I'm going to give you such a back rub that you'll be silky smooth in no time, won't you?" Adriana frightened him, so that he had no doubt about it. And she took 2 steps toward the stove. "All right, what's the matter with you?" "I'm just kidding. Go to your Kathy. But I'd still be careful about doing that. There's a reason people say she's cursed." Aha! One fool started a rumor, and the rest of them picked up on it. So they're running around with that curse like a piece of paper. They don't know where to put it. I don't want to see you indulging them too. If I hear you say you support this outrage again, I'll attach it from the bottom of my heart. I get it. Why make it worse?" Charles begged. "Is it a pity? Bring the pie to her. Let her eat it, and remember our kindness. But no one else will feel sorry for her. Charles, and I'll hit you with something, and you'll ask for it." Adriana furrowed her eyebrows and put her hands to her sides. "No, I'll have to invite my mom to visit us for a week. She'll quickly teach you to love life. Not my mother-in-law. Betty will destroy me." Not in vain he was so scared, because Adriana's mother was a strong-willed and even a little tough with a woman. The locals frankly feared her, as they knew what she was capable of. They even said, as if Betty could easily grab a cow by the horns with her hands and force it to the ground. "That's a good boy. You're starting to show me your temper." Adriana smiled and stepped away from the stove. "I'll go to Kathy's for a couple of hours and come back. We still have potatoes to perch and cucumbers to pick. That way I can do it myself." To Charles, stretching out his arms to hug his wife. "No, you can't. Last time, you almost tore it up with your grandmother. You need an eye on you. You can't leave an eye unattended. Don't look at me like that. We'll do it together. In the meantime, you can fetch some water for the bath. I'm doing the linens today, too. I'll do it. What do you say?" "All right. I'll go, or the cake will get cold. I can feel it in my heart that she's in trouble again. You don't know what's going on with the family." "You know," Charles shrugged. "Yeah, I agree." Adriana nodded and left the kitchen. Charles looked out the window and walked his wife out the gate. At the same time, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Adriana did not go wild, as she usually did, and quickly calmed down. At the same time, she put him in his place without any effort on her part, and he was forced to submit to her will, even though he had his own opinion. He simply did not have the guts to prioritize the roles in their family. That's why most often Adriana took the initiative and controlled all the processes in the house. Like, for example, she had just instructed him to draw water for the bath, and also hinted at other household chores. In addition, ordered nullo during the altercation, yes, so that he almost lost the gift of speech. Not only that, immediately like a guilty child in front of his parents. In general, Charles showed a weak will, and all because he loved Adriana so much, especially since she compensated him for her emotional outbursts later anyway. Adriana went away from the house literally 20 meters, and she immediately met a local milkmaid, Christina, on the way. She moved along the road. She walked with her head held high and proud. Not only that, but she showed that she was superior in status. In fact, Christina was nothing impressive. She was an ordinary villager working on a farm. She lived with her alcoholic husband, James, with no children or prospects of ever having any. And not because her health didn't permit it. Just strong drinks negatively affected the male strength of the husband, and he was not able to give Christina a piece of maternal happiness. But she kept hoping that someday a miracle would happen and nature would reward her with a long-awaited child. But first of all, it was necessary to wean her husband from alcohol. However, James was not going to give up a bad habit. On the contrary, he is more and more often attached to the bottle, as if it magnetically attracted him to himself. At times, of course, he had an epiphany, but only for a short time, to cleanse his system and again to fill this collar. Christina fought him like a bird with a naughty bird, but she couldn't make it work, so she immersed herself in herself. In other words, she ignored his presence and concentrated solely on her own appearance. Today, on her way to Christina's farm, she painted her lips, lined her eyelids, and used mascara to enhance her eyelashes. It's as if you're not going to work, but to a cafe or a restaurant to have fun. Adriana sighed heavily when she saw her waving face and said hello for the sake of decorum. "Good morning, Christina." "Hello, Adriana." "Overhead," she replied. "You're in a hurry to get to your cows. Of course, I have nothing else to worry about." "In a way, yes," Adriana asked with a furrowed brow. "He just said that, and that's all." Not paying attention, waving her hand in a squeamish manner, Christina continued on her way. "Oh well, have a good day. Take care." Adriana looked at her and shook her head angrily. She understood exactly what Christina wanted to say. Christina envied the fact that she had a good life, except for her infantile husband. And above all, that applied to her job as well. Adriana had a position as assistant to the head of administration for public relations, and she handled a lot of tasks that required a special approach, you could say. Adriana had organizational skills. A prime example was her own family. Her husband almost unquestioningly carried out all the errands and tried to keep a balance of equilibrium so that there was harmony between them. Christina, on the other hand, had neither. Here she was responding about other concerns. In essence, the milkmaid expressed her dissatisfaction with the fact that no one took her seriously. She worked on the farm on an equal footing with everyone else, and the bosses were in no hurry to recognize her in any way. Like a bonus, even on holidays, Christina, like the rest of the staff, received the standard gifts, but she wanted much more than what she already had. And then there was her alcoholic husband. And Christina could not leave him, because there were no other decent options in the village. All the good men lived with their families, and the ones that hung around like a loiterer, so they were not spoiled by fate. So it turned out that she lived like a gray mouse and could not get out of this vicious circle. Adriana was different, despite the fact that she was only 5 years older than her. Not only did the Duma bring order and control, but she was also praised at work. The head of the administration several times nominated for the award and always supported her candidacy because they believed that if a person showed perseverance and achieved the goals, he deserves the best praise. Not to say that the prize was worth a lot of money, but the very fact of its award gave confidence and raised a step higher in their own eyes. She turned to walk, so as not to meet anyone again. Adriana walked through the vegetable gardens and approached a familiar fence. It was where her friend Kathy lived with her husband Mason, an overbearing and arrogant man. Some even said that he had the traits of a despot, but in public he behaved with delicacy and friendliness. Looking around to make sure no one could see, either pushed aside the edges of the netting and squeezed in. About this Malaysia, she had only recently learned when she came to Kathy's house and wandered along the currant hedge. It was likely that the owners were aware of this back door, but were in no hurry to get rid of it. And that was to Adriana's advantage. She could get onto their property unnoticed. And given the way Kathy was viewed by a certain part of the population, the data was important. However, it was not wise to rely on it all the time. Mason could seal up an unauthorized passageway at any time. That was why Adriana was already thinking of alternatives for herself. In addition, she was making plans for Kathy's future. She was tired of watching her friend cry all the time while saying everything was fine. But in fact, she was afraid of her own husband, trembled before him, and could not say a word against him. Such a relationship caused disgust and hatred. And Adriana, no. Yes, I took Kathy into account. I wanted to, even though I realized that her husband wasn't a gift either. True, they still managed to find a compromise and solve all the problems without loud scandals. Here, everything was held on despotism. Mason. He did not tolerate to be carried and was not distinguished by special knowledge in terms of household management. Kathy did everything for him and did not even try to object. She was afraid Mason would throw her out on the street, and she had no one in the village to go to. So she gritted her teeth and carried all the chores around the house. She walked along the carrot beds. Adriana found herself in the backyard and immediately saw Kathy. She was hanging laundry and didn't even notice her appearance. "Hi, friend." She waved. "Oh, hi." Kathy smiled and replied. "You came in the back door again, and we can't get the fence fixed. Do you have a husband for that? Let him take the tools and hold it up. That's easy for you to say. And the other day I tried to object. You were looking for the fifth corner. I personally am not a gift either, but we still somehow find a common language," shrugged Adriana. "Yes, I am sometimes rude to him, but only for preventive purposes. Otherwise he will relax and will not do anything at all. They spoiled him as a child, so he grew up to be a mama's boy. But you've been able to rehabilitate him, haven't you?" Kathy objected. "And I have to put up with it. And I don't know what to do. I want to quit and go away, but there's nowhere to go. Yeah, it's a tough situation. After your grandmother died, there's no family left. Only my brother comes to mind." "Well, you said yourself you haven't seen him since he left home." "Right after high school," Kathy nodded. "William was 18 then, and he'd decided to make his own life. His mother was buried 6 months ago, and his grandmother didn't bother to keep him. And he hadn't been around since," Adriana clarified, though she knew Kathy hadn't seen her brother for a long time. "No, it's been 15 years, and no sign of him. Like he's disappeared into thin air. It's like he never even existed. I don't even know what happened to him. Maybe he's living with someone or something. Let's not make any tragic assumptions. He didn't just leave home. He must have known where to go. And I think he's alive. He just can't come to you yet. Anything's possible. I hope I'll see him again someday," Kathy said thoughtfully, and splashed the rest of the water out of the garden. "Let's go inside. Why are we on the street like poor relatives? I didn't come to you empty-handed." Adriana smiled and pointed at the bag. "And to be honest, I guessed it right away. You smell from a mile away with her strangely, but Christina did not smell anything. Is this about that milkmaid?" Kathy's eyebrows furrowed. "Yeah. And I just missed her, so she's probably forgotten what it's like. She's on the farm by day and with her husband at night. No time to cook. It's a shame, but Christina chose this fate for herself." "You don't say, Kathy. Everywhere you look there's trouble." He waved his hand and followed her into the house. Inside it was quiet and cozy. Kathy kept the place clean and tidied up every day. She didn't even have time for dust to accumulate, and all the surfaces shone as if polished, and for that alone Mason should have thanked his wife. But no, he ostentatiously ignored what she was doing and found any excuse to pick on her and show her power. Kathy didn't know how to please him anymore. She was spinning like a squirrel in a wheel, to be able to finish all the things to do by the time he came. But still she'd get her ass handed to her, and then she'd sneak off to cry. Mason probably knew about it, but he pretended like it was normal. "Have a seat. We're going to have tea." Kathy pointed to a chair and then turned on the gas to comfort and put a large kettle on it. "Aha. And I'll just get the hotels." Adriana winked and pulled a towel-wrapped cake out of the bag. "I could barely get it away from my husband. He looked at it so pitifully." "Did you leave him without a pie?" "No, there's still a few slices left. I'm not an abuser. I know he likes to eat, so he wouldn't be tempted to eat it all at once. I made him fetch water for the laundry. I'm surprised he listens to you." I wiped Kathy's shoulders and took clean plates out of the cupboard. "I'm a tough cookie. And if my mom comes over, it's a disaster." Adriana raised her index finger up and said menacingly, "Charles knows it well and doesn't get into a bottle." "Really? I don't go overboard either. Otherwise, I'd hate myself. A husband should help his wife, and preferably without reminders. Unfortunately, I can't do that. Probably the face did not come out, and I do not know how to command. You have to have so much stamina to keep your voice steady. What's right is right. Otherwise, they won't listen. But you're not desperate. You and me, we'll figure something out." "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet, but we can't leave it like this." Adriana shrugged, took a knife out of the desk drawer, and cut the pie into small pieces. Kathy placed them on plates and then poured tea into mugs. The aromatic taste of raspberries immediately wafted through the kitchen. She liked to make berry-based brews and added fresh leaves to enhance the contrast and give the drink a rich flavor. Adriana nodded her head and took the first sip. "What do you think?" Kathy asked her. "It tasted like nectar. Interesting aftertaste. I picked raspberry leaves this morning and added honey and cherries to make an assortment. And you've done well." Adriana praised her, taking a piece of pie from her plate and giving it to her. "I didn't bring it for the exhibition." "Oh, I was just thinking. I've been having all kinds of thoughts lately. And if they're bad, I have to chase them away. By the way, where's Mason?" "It's Saturday, and he's working a 5-day week. He went fishing. Up before dawn." Shrugged off Kathy along with some friend I've never seen before. "That's right. And then he starts bringing women into the house," Adriana said ironically. "And you're also going to speculate on where they came from. Doesn't hurt. I'm so sick. It's his house. I can't forbid it." There was an awkward pause, all because Adriana didn't know what argument to make. Kathy was really on a bird's license and could be out on the street at any moment. That's why it was absolutely inappropriate to make harsh statements and hasty decisions. It was necessary to proceed cautiously and preferably without attracting unnecessary attention. It meant that Mason should know nothing. After all, there was no telling how he would react to either frowning his brow and staring at a single point on the opposite wall. At this point, she was overcome with doubts about whether to suggest Kathy leave her husband or continue to be morally supportive. Both options required concrete steps and effort, and it wasn't a given that Kathy's life would improve markedly afterward. At least Adriana did not have a clear vision of her future either. She could not yet imagine her friend outside the walls of this house, especially since there were no prospects of living elsewhere. Mason seemed to have calculated everything in advance and manipulated his wife. But there was a limit to everything, and soon it came, and in the most unexpected way. And immediately after that, Kathy's further existence changed fundamentally. She stopped being afraid of the unknown and made what was a turning point in her fate. In addition, she threw off the hateful shackles that prevented her from breathing freely, and all these events happened with the help of Adriana. A friend found a way out of the situation and brought back the joy of life. Together, they still had a hard road ahead of them, but the first steps in that direction had been taken. And as the harsh reality showed, the desire to be free sold all visible and invisible obstacles. "Why didn't you go fishing with him?" "Are you laughing? This is a purely male occupation." Kathy waved her hand. "Besides, I can't look at a float for long." "So I did not mean that you also," Rybachenko corrected yourself. "Adriana, you could have just gone and had a vacation. I could have made them some soup too. That's the point." "No, Mason will never agree to that. He doesn't think women should be in the company of men." "Aha. And he's allowed around women." "Oh, really? Everyone's equal at work. I hang out with men at the bakery too, and Mason doesn't resent it." "That's because everybody knows him. That's why they don't get under your skirt," Adriana replied snidely. "And if you were somebody else's wife, you'd hardly be able to fight them off. I'm not so pretty that men would stack up in front of me." Kathy shook her head. "But Mason appreciated your beauty and clung to you like a tick. I'm not exaggerating. because I knew what they said about Mason in the village. He bragged at every turn about his wife, that she was the best in the world. And everyone thought he was a good and caring family man. And the fact that they still hadn't been able to have kids, it didn't bother anyone at all. All in good time. That's how they reasoned. In fact, Kathy could have gotten pregnant and had a baby a long time ago. But she'd had 2 miscarriages in the last year and a half. And Mason told everyone it was hereditary, like her mom was a cuckoo. And now she was forced to suffer the vicissitudes of fate. In fact, he convinced his acquaintances and those who knew him well that Kathy was incapable of childbirth. Fate had punished her for her mother's mistakes and denied them the opportunity to be loving parents. And what was interesting was that Mason had a calm demeanor about it. He didn't seem to be particularly upset by the prospect, and he was willing to live without children as long as he was near Kathy. But that was just a screen. Mason thus covered up his own despotism while remaining a decent man in the eyes of the people around him. And he was not at all concerned that the truth might sooner or later come to the surface. It was as if he had backups for all sorts of cases. With them, Mason felt more confident and was not afraid that there would be some unforeseen event. But as you know, no one has ever been able to insure against everything. And any mistakes sometimes cost a whole life. I've gotten used to it, Kathy replied abruptly, though it was obvious that she had a hard time with these words. You shouldn't, friend. You can't dislike yourself like that. Adriana shook her head. If you're always in his way, you'll end up with no past and no future at all. I don't look back. I have nothing to brag about. And I won't be sorry if it disappears into oblivion. As for the future, I don't think I can change anything. That's what you think. You just have to make up your mind and not be afraid. By the way, how long is Mason going fishing? He won't be back until tomorrow, I take it. I'm not sure, Kathy said. They're supposed to have an important meeting there, so he'll be gone for at least a day or 2. That's just great. Adriana exclaimed. What do you mean? We can go to our club to dance and have some fun. You're just sitting at home alone. No, I can't. Mason will scold me. Somebody he knows will see me and report me. He'll come and make a scene. And I'm so tired of all this nervousness. Oh, come on, girl. You've let yourself go. You should get out of the house once in a while. I go to work and I have enough, objected Kathy, as if it was a big event for her to get to the bakery and back. Don't make my knees laugh. Adriana shook her head. It's only a 10-minute walk. You can't breathe the air in that time, and you can't breathe the air. All right, I'll give you that, but only for an hour at most. And mind you, I won't dance with anyone there. You don't have to. We can dance without a man. I'm not going to give myself a thrill either. Then why go there at all? It's just for the mood, to keep the sad thoughts out of my head. I might as well listen to music at home. Kathy shrugged, not drinking the rest of her tea. It's up to you. If you think you're up for it, come on over. Adriana summed up and pushed the empty plate away from her. Good. There's still time. I'll make a decision by tonight. I'll be glad to see you at the club. Charles and I will be there when it opens so we don't miss anything. Will you walk back the same way? Or through the wicket? Kathy asked with a smile. Through the gardens, so that no one would follow me, Adriana said with irony in her voice. All right, come on, I'll walk you out. Adriana got up from the table and headed for the exit. Kathy threw her handkerchief over her head and followed her out of the house. They were almost down the stairs when they heard the chirping of birds. She shuddered with surprise. Adriana stopped and listened. It seemed to her that someone came to the wicket. For about a minute she tried to pick up any sounds, but nothing else came from there but birdsong. She breathed out a sigh of relief. She looked at Kathy and whispered, I'm getting a little paranoid. I've got to stop with this conspiracy thing. I think so too. So the next time they came through the gate, they went out into the city, and Adriana took the same route to the back door in the fence. And if one didn't get close to it, It wasn't noticeable that it was holding on by fair means, pushing it aside. Adriana turned around, nodded to Kathy, and climbed out. Back home, she walked back through the vegetable gardens so she wouldn't accidentally run into anyone. As she did so, she thought about how her mindset was. After all, he might have been worried. But then, with a satisfied smile on his face, he left the house when Adriana opened the gate. That was fast, and I thought you'd be here later. You shouldn't be left alone for too long. She waved. Besides, the laundry's waiting. Potatoes, cucumbers. I have to get everything done by tonight. He's disappearing again. Charles' eyebrows furrowed, and the smile immediately fell off his face. Let's go out together. And not just anywhere, but to the dance. Oh, great. I love it in India. By the way, I've cleaned up the house so I can do laundry and other things. Good for you. That's why I love you, because you're so smart. Adriana clung to her husband and kissed him gently on the lips. This display of affection showed that the harmony between them was still intact, and no strict rules could affect them. Even demanding with them did not discourage the desire to love each other. In other words, everything must be in moderation, without skewing in any direction, and they managed to balance on a certain line, beyond which they never went. Adriana knew what not to do in a family relationship under any circumstances, and she kept herself in line, even if there were reasons to take drastic action. The same was true of Charles. He also did not test her patience and tried to level all sharp points. From their family, they differed in that they did not humiliate each other and did not try to put themselves at the head of the line. True, Adriana puts much more effort to make the house comfortable and cozy, but at the same time, she did not get back at her husband and did not chase him around every corner and did not forbid him to do what he liked, but asked that it did not go beyond the bounds of decency. I'm wearing a new suit tonight. How do I surround myself in the dance? Charles smiled, and again he hugged his wife tightly. Let me go, or you'll strangle her. She jumped out of his embrace and added, I didn't tell you the main thing about the club. Maybe Kathy's coming. Did you invite her, or was she just going to go? Of course she'd never dare to go to the club alone again. She's got a strict ban on that now. She's on a fishing vacation. You mean Mason, don't you? Clarified Charles, as if he didn't realize who he was talking about. Yeah, well, she doesn't have any other inhibitions besides him. Shook her head, and now she doesn't know how he feels about it. You know, like an owl watches his wife, and it is worth any man to look in her direction, as immediately scowls his eyebrows and glares, but cannot do anything. Yeah, maybe. Especially since I'd never seen him in a fight, Charles shrugged. Never had a chance to get into a fight with him. And the other men say he tries to avoid direct involvement in reading. If there's a way to settle it with words, why not? Adriana offered her version. That's the thing. Mason rarely even gets into altercations. He probably has his own way of dealing with things. And you, of course, know nothing about it. No, darling, I don't go into such details. Charles shook his head. I don't need them, especially since Mason and I seldom talk to each other. Only if we meet on the street somewhere. Come on, I was just asking, she said, waving her hand and laughing loudly. Are you sure Kathy won't regret it? I told her if she wanted to come, she could come. And what did she say? She said she'd work something out before tonight. I see. Perhaps she won't come. Leaving her husband to ponder, Adriana went to the bathhouse to start the laundry. Time-wise, she still had time before going to the club, but it was necessary to decide something about clothes and first of all to choose an appropriate outfit. Charles suggested a blue silk dress with a belt and original pleats on the sides. Adriana looked at the other options and finally chose the silk dress that her husband had suggested, especially since she hoped not only to dance, but also to create an aura of admiring female gazes around her. Charles calculated his chances and tried on the suit he was talking about, and it turned out that they complemented each other perfectly. From the outside, it looked as if they hadn't just returned from the registry office. Adriana twirled in front of the mirror and said quite loudly, "I am such a stunning woman." "You are." Charles nodded. "Do you really think so, or are you here?" She asked him flirtatiously. "My thoughts are all about how great you look." "All right then, I'll take your word for it. But look, if anything goes wrong, I'll leave you there alone." "What about Kathy?" Charles made a joke. "You'll dance with her." In the head, Adriana replied and pretended to be offended. "I'm sorry, it was a bad joke. I figured it was. So you can relax. Let's get the laundry hung up so it's dry before dark." In half an hour, they had scattered all the clothes from the laundry on the ropes. Adriana looked around at the result and nodded contentedly. "I had recently bought a new powder and decided to test its effectiveness, and it turned out that it justified itself 100%. At the same time, it did not take much for one wash. In general, it was concluded that it is suitable for further use." "It smells fresh," Charles said. "Yes, just what I needed." Adriana nodded her head. "This is the only detergent I'll use from now on. I don't have to add conditioner. Though I guess I can't do without it anyway." It was still 4 o'clock till evening, and during this time I had to do the rest of the things. After a little warm-up in the vegetable garden, they decided to prepare dinner in advance so that they wouldn't have to go to bed on an empty stomach. Charles helped a lot with the cooking, and Adriana did the rest. Working together in the kitchen had a positive effect on the general mood. They even mentally imagined how they would twirl to the rhythm of the dance. At the same time, Kathy's appearance at the club was still questionable. She did not really answer whether she would come or not, and so the couple could only guess. But they still had a faint hope that fear of her husband would not make her stay at home. In any case, Adriana and Charles expected to spend the evening together, but they had no idea how it would turn out. As it turned out later, Mason had kept informants on hand to report Kathy's every move. As soon as she left the house, she was under surveillance by concerned people. They must have enjoyed watching. Probably got money too, and not just words of thanks. In general, this moment remained behind 7 seals, and it was hard to say for what carpets these people sacrificed their personal time. But interestingly enough, they always went unnoticed. Kathy didn't see them when she went anywhere. She was in the clouds somewhere and tried not to look around. There was no heavy traffic in the village, so she was in no danger of being hit by a racer. Kathy chose her route with the utmost precision and always returned home unharmed. After Adriana left her, she thought long and hard about her proposal to go to the club and came to the conclusion that it would be all right if she had a dance tonight, albeit without a partner, but for the soul and the mood. And that should have been enough to mentally and physically rest. After all, she had hardly any free time lately. She was always doing something. It was as if Kathy had been programmed for exhausting housekeeping. But her husband, on the contrary, only reaped the benefits and rejoiced. But at the same time, she doesn't bother with household chores. After weighing the pros and cons, she opened her closet and began to choose an outfit. There weren't many brightly colored things in her closet, but Kathy was still able to find something for tonight's trip to the club. And what was interesting, all the fear of being seen by someone from her husband's acquaintance had faded into the background. She as something abruptly gained courage, and this state of euphoria overshadowed other feelings, and first of all, intuition. It told her that it would be bad luck to go to the dance. Kathy didn't want to listen to it, because she was determined to get out of the vicious circle. She had a clear plan of how she would behave in the club. "I think it's all set." Charles exhaled sharply and looked at the dinner with a smile. "We're like a team," Adriana said. "It's always worked out that way. And no problems." "What do you mean?" "Yeah, that sometimes you have to push someone around. And it's very unnerving, especially when the ducks are on their 5th day. I take your hint. I'll try to make it up to you," Charles said affectionately. "You won't be nervous anymore. I promise. Would you like a snack for the road?" "No, I'm the one who shakes once, and then I'm done." Don't go on with the wrinkles, Adriana. I remembered your last birthday when you ate too much and drank too much. Well, I was overjoyed. Darling, it was my anniversary after all. Charles made a pitiful face. Exactly. And then it felt like I was the one who got the big surprise. And I was quoting everything afterward. It was so funny. Anyway, we'll save the dinner for later so it's not embarrassing. Yeah, I agree with you. All the more reason. And it's gonna be hard for me to dance with a full belly. Having changed into their festive outfits, the couple sat down for a moment, looked at each other, and left the house. On the way, they met the same disco lovers, and all of them were happy to go to the club, anticipating in advance a rousing mood. Besides, loud music was already coming from there. Adriana nudged her husband in the side and quietly said, "Look, she's here." She did. And in a beautiful dress, Charles nodded. "What did you say? Do I look worse?" "No, I think you're gorgeous. And I'm sorry for judging Kathy's dress." "Come on, calm down. I'm not mad." Adriana smiled and waved her hand at her friend Kathy. "It really looks beautiful, especially since I'm not jealous of you." "Thank you for that. I was about to fall through the ground." Charles sighed heavily and wiped the droplets of sweat from his forehead. It was obvious that he had taken his wife's displeasure seriously, but she let him know in time that she was not angry, and in general that it was a joke, aimed at watching his reaction. At any rate, that's exactly what it looked like. It was in doing so that it didn't cross a dangerous line, after which there would definitely be no turning back. Kathy waved in response as well, and with a smile on her face, she headed in their direction. She was outright glowing with happiness, as if she was here for the first time. And right, taking off Adriana. With excitement, she said, "And I was so worried that I wouldn't be able to make up my mind. But then I thought about it, and I realized I was getting myself worked up for nothing. It hasn't even been a year. How did you come to the right conclusion? I hope you won't regret it. Otherwise, you might change your mind and leave." No, I'll stay. Especially since you're here too. This is gonna be awkward. We had an agreement. That's fine. Now let's go inside and see what's going on. The club has changed a lot since the overhaul. It no longer looked like an old shabby building and did not repel with its gloomy facade, as in the old days. On the contrary, no money was spared for its reconstruction, and now the local population has an opportunity to have a cultural rest, looking at such splendor. Young people also came to the club. Previously, they could not be drawn there by any concerts, and after the renovation there were sometimes no free places left, and they had to dance in the open air. Tonight, however, they were lucky, and the club was not yet filled with dancers. Adriana took Kathy's hand and led her into the back of the room. Charles stayed at the entrance, meeting a familiar tractor driver. "I'll come back later, darling." He waved to her. "Okay, but don't stay too long," she replied with a smile. Together with Kathy, they approached the head of music and asked to play something energetic. He suggested several options, and the women chose a repertoire from the 90s. In a minute, a familiar tune came from the speakers, and it was picked up by several other clubgoers. Adriana even half-voiced sang, remembering her youth. She was so engrossed in the song that she stopped paying attention to the people around her. Kathy looked enviously at her friend. For her, it seemed, it was not quite usual to see Adriana in such a role. But at the same time, she appreciated her talent. And at the end of the performance, she clapped her hands loudly. "Did you sing so beautifully that I could hear you?" Kathy said enthusiastically. "Thank you for the compliment." Adriana thanked her. "But that's nothing. When Charles and I sing with guitar, it's a real hit. I'll have to invite you over sometime to hear it. How about tonight? Why not? As long as my husband doesn't take it on his chest." Adriana turned around and with her eyes shining with joy looked for Charles around the room. After a moment, her gaze caught a familiar silhouette and literally drilled through him. As if he sensed his wife looking at him and stepped out of the shadows, making the guilty face. At the frown in his brow, she shook her head and with her facial expression, signaled for him not to get carried away. It looked like Charles had met up with some friends and decided to have a few drinks with them. But there was no hiding from his wife, and now he had to leave the pleasant company somehow. "Sorry, men, but I'm going to my sweetheart's. We understand discipline and all that," with sarcasm answered friends. Come on. I just love my wife very much." He waved his hand at them. "Go already, or we'll have to drag you to her and say hello. Don't let her swear." "All right, I'll tell her you didn't want to give me a drink." I insisted. "That's a bit of a stretch, but we like the idea." Charles couldn't believe what he promised, but he didn't take it back. And as soon as he approached his wife, he reported in one breath, "It's not their fault. It was me who drank without their permission. Forgive me and do whatever you want." "Oh, I can hardly believe that Peter didn't pour." Adriana shook her head. "Honestly, you can ask him yourself." "All right, I'll take your word for it. But don't drink any more. You and I still have dancing to do, and we have to keep company along the line." "What do you mean?" Charles frowned, looking at his wife, and then at her friend. "Oh, don't be such a baby. Just one dance, so she doesn't get bored. And don't worry, I won't be jealous. Kathy is like a sister to me. I don't see her any other way." "Don't, Adriana. There's plenty of Mason people around here." Kathy said no and waved her arms. "If they see me, I won't get away with a simple reprimand and reproach." "Does he hit you?" Angrily, she asked. "No, I was just saying that." Kathy hesitated and began to rub her fingers through her dress. Adriana noticed her agitation and shook her head. "I have no words, just emotions. Not only is she not letting me go anywhere, but she's letting her hands get in the way. And I should probably go home." Squinting toward the exit, Kathy said quietly, "I shouldn't have thought of taking you up on your offer. Are you saying I lured you to the club on purpose?" No. It's my weak will. Mason wouldn't let me, but I did it anyway." "Charles, look at what she's saying." Adriana looked at her husband indignantly. "I'm not an advisor. Let her decide." He shook his head. "Yes, it's better if I go guiltily with my head down." Kathy walked across the hall and found herself outside. The music continued to play, and tears sprang from her eyes at that moment. And it seemed possible to go back, but some unknown force made her go home, quicken her step. Kathy headed towards the walk, and only had a few meters to go to finally disappear from sight. But Adriana caught up with her. "Hold on, friend. You can't just walk away like that. I've done something else to offend you." "It's not that. I just don't understand why you're acting like this. I thought we talked about it this afternoon, and you supported my proposal. You even came to the club despite your husband's inhibitions. Tell me, didn't you like the fact that I let you drool and dance? What's your husband got to do with it?" "It's not like he was going to seduce me," Kathy replied grudgingly. "I was just afraid people would misunderstand and say horrible things to Mason." "I don't disagree. There are gossipers among the villagers." Adriana nodded. "Give them a free hand. They'll work it out. And then you'll have to prove you're not a camel." "That's exactly why I left. I'm sorry to have ruined your lovely evening, but I really should get back to my house." "Okay, I get it. I won't keep you. If you need anything, you know my number. Call me anytime." And that was the end of it. And in a few seconds, Kathy disappeared around the corner. Back at the club, Adriana pretended that everything was fine, and she and her husband continued dancing. The mood, of course, was a little spoiled, but it did not prevent them to dance vigorously for an hour to the beat of the music coming from the speakers. And only 15 minutes before closing time, the couple left the club. There were still people inside, but none of them were dancing. Some stood along the walls and whispered about something, and others were arguing among themselves with passion, taking a brave water on their chests. Taking Charles under her arm, Adriana looked around, chose the most lighted part of the road, and quickened her step. They walked in silence for several minutes until her husband broke the silence. She shouldn't have left after all. She could have listened to some music and unwinded. Now she'll think we set her up. Calm down. Kathy's not the kind of man to make a big deal out of something. Adriana put him on the spot. So we have nothing to worry about. Charles tried to clarify. If you mean that Kathy will get angry and hate us, then nothing like that will happen. She won't make a tragedy out of it, but will draw the appropriate conclusions. All right. Well, I'll put it down to your arguments and reasoning. You're a problem solver. And I've seen that once again. And you are good at compliments. Adriana praised him. Keep it up. And who knows, maybe the day is not far off when I will be the calmest and kindest wife in the world. After this praise, Charles blossomed and walked the rest of the way home with his wife in his arms. She didn't mind. And he felt a thrill of delight and begged with pleasure. That's what the right and appropriate words meant. They warmed the soul and caused a response in the form of positive emotions. Once home, the couple did not even have dinner. Going to the club took almost all their strength. They only managed to change clothes, straighten the bed, and go to bed. Charles was asleep in about 15 minutes. Adriana couldn't sleep for another hour. She wondered how Kathy had gotten to her house and whether she was all right. I mean, my friend warned me that Mason's friends might have told him, and twisted it in their own way. It frightened Adriana and made her angry at the same time. She didn't understand how she could treat herself in such a way that even the most ordinary dancing in the club made her shiver with fear. Besides, a woman was entitled to a private vacation. Adriana mentally imagined how Kathy would report to her husband and ate a little bit of fat. Not exactly a pleasant picture surfaced before her eyes. Mason's face was red with hatred and her friend was in tears and showing signs of abuse. Putting her palms to her face, Adriana whispered what she was doing. At this point, Charles was studying, and she had to close her eyes. She lay on her back for a few more minutes before sleep finally took over her mind. However, thoughts of the showdown between Mason and Kathy transformed into a restless night. No nightmares plagued her, and she even woke up twice. Fortunately, her husband didn't see it, or else he would have tortured her with questions, and then would have forbidden to communicate with Kathy at all. The anxiety only receded with the dawn. But by then, Adriana didn't want to sleep. She just lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The thought that Kathy would be in trouble because of her was like a thorn in her side. But at the same time, she didn't have a clear plan yet. How to help her friend. And that made it even more depressing. Adriana felt like a helpless child who had been locked in a closet and the lights turned off. Turning to face her husband, she kissed him on the cheek. Charles, however, did not even turn his head. It was as if his sense of smell and touch were temporarily shut off. As for Kathy herself, after leaving Adriana, she walked briskly to the house and locked herself in. It was as if she was afraid that right now Mason would burst in and punish her. But that didn't happen. And she was perfectly safe until morning. But at the first rooster crowing, trouble crept up on her in the form of an angry husband. The sound sleep was disturbed by a clang. Opening his lock on the wicket gate, Kathy jumped out of bed and went to the window. In the yard, she saw her red-faced husband and realized without further ado that everything had been reported to him. A moment later, a loud stomping on the veranda was heard, followed by the sound of the door slamming. Without removing his shoes, Mason unceremoniously rushed into the hall and grabbed her by the shoulders. "Who gave you permission to go clubbing?" "And all I wanted to do was listen to music and dance." With a tremor in her voice, Kathy replied. And then she cried. "No. And if you've done wrong," Mason thundered, "you should be able to take responsibility for your actions. And by the way, who are you going to dance with? I don't need anyone but you." "I don't think so. Probably some tractor driver was hanging around you anyway. Yashka, for example. He doesn't give a hoot. He just wants to chase other people's skirts. Yashka never came near me." "I was alone," objected Kathy, wiping her tears. "Don't give me that bullshit." Mason put his hands out like he was going to push her. "I know you were in the company of your close friend and her husband." "Amuba, Why would you say that? They're good and decent people. Well, you should go live with them. What are you staring at? You think I'm going to put up with your antics? But I didn't do anything wrong, Kathy shrugged. I just went to a club. That's good enough for me, Mason muttered. And he came almost right up to her. Then everything developed like a nightmare, and Kathy regretted going to the club 100 times. This ill-considered act led to a serious confrontation. Mason showed not only with words, but also partly with his hands who was the boss of the house. It was worth nothing to him. All it did was blow off steam, and Kathy got another dose of humiliation. And so it could go on for quite a long time, if not for one shocking event. Right after it, she had a sharp change in her views on life, and she decided to take a desperate step. And only her best friend Adriana was there in time to prevent the tragedy. She had the courage to give a decent response to the tyrant Mason. Having experienced all the anger and hatred of her husband, Kathy for several days did not go out at all. She was like a gray mouse wandering around the yard, doing all the household chores. She kept her head down for fear of meeting her husband's eyes. Mason enjoyed to see her agonizing and shaking with fear. He was proud of his methods of upbringing and exulted in the unifying taste of victory over a woman. Except he couldn't think of how she would get back at him. A plan of retribution had been rolling around in her head for a long time, but it lacked important details. Adriana helped with that, when she brought a surprise one day. It was so unexpected that Kathy almost fainted and then cried for a long time, not believing her own eyes. She had never hoped that this would ever happen. However, fate decided to help her get rid of tyranny and threw the key in the form of one single person. At the same time, she had not called Adriana all these days, and this silence gave her a feeling of uneasiness. She woke up in the morning and roused her husband. With excitement in her voice, she said, "It seems to me that Kathy must be saved. Is it really you, or are you just having a nightmare?" asked Charles. "I feel in all seriousness in my heart that she is completely gone." Adriana got up from the bed and fixed her hair on her head. "What do you mean? Did she leave home?" "Yes, what an incomprehensible person. I meant that she was in a bad way and was going down the drain. With a husband like that, it's no wonder. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner." Charles had to stand up too, because it was uncomfortable to talk to his wife while looking down at her. "What do you suggest? Do you have any thoughts about it?" Adriana asked him. "Go in there with a showdown. Neither you nor I have the right. Mason can send him away, and he'll get away with it, especially since Kathy won't complain about him to the police. Then I'll do it myself, if she doesn't have the guts. It's best if you just meet her and talk to her. See how she's doing. Naturally nervous. I could see that at the time. I meant her appearance, as well as her hands, face, and feet," Charles added. "And if you notice any characteristic marks, you can go to Jacob, although he's not likely to get involved in family disputes." "Why is that?" Frowned his eyebrows. Adriana asked. "Yes, because he has a close relationship with Mason. You must have seen how his house has been transformed since the renovation. It's beautiful. The roof's been replaced, new windows put in. Little things like that." "That's right. And it's not all on his salary." Charles nodded and went into the kitchen to put the kettle on. "I can see why Kathy hasn't had a go at him yet." Adriana put her arm around her husband and rested her head on his shoulders. "I thought our policeman was the most honest man in the village, but he went down the path of bribery and crookedness here, and I didn't know it. I guessed remotely, but I didn't believe it until the last, especially since we don't talk to him that often. He even comes to the office just to say hello and show that he's working." "Of course he does. He's got reports to file," Charles shrugged. "That's why I don't know if he can. And would he want to help you? You'd have to fight with Mason and refuse his handouts." "Yeah, it's a bit of a stalemate," Adriana replied in a sad voice. "But we have to do something. Otherwise, Kathy will never get out of this vicious circle. It's important that she realizes the futility of living with Mason. Otherwise, It's like we're supposed to help her with good intentions, and then we're the ones who get screwed. That's not gonna happen. You don't have to worry. I'll find a way to make Mason respect Kathy. And if I have to, I will go to extreme measures. And that's when he'll know what an angry woman is. I'm already afraid, Charles smiled. You're in no danger, so you can relax. Adriana replied humorously and kissed him gently on the lips. Let's have breakfast, and I took a walk to Kathy. I can't wait to see her. Something like that. I'm gonna give her a pep talk. And then I'll go to the office. I've got 2 applications to send out to the region. Okay, then I'll fry some eggs and make sandwiches. Adriana nodded in response and began to tidy herself up in front of the mirror. Charles looked in her direction and fairly faltered his tongue. It was only in the morning when he woke up that he could see her lush hair in all its glory. The rest of the time, she either did her hair in pigtails or put it up in a ponytail. Noticing her husband's languid gaze, Adriana waved her hand and said, "Are you embarrassing me? I can't concentrate like this. I'm sorry. I was just admiring it." Charles turned back to the stove and killed the fire so the scrambled eggs wouldn't burn. 20 minutes later, everything was ready, and they sat down to breakfast. Adriana looked gorgeous. In spite of waking up so early, her face had no trace of her long lying on the pillow. On the contrary, it shone like a beauty salon and emphasized her beauty. Charles could not help but notice it and winked lovingly. Adriana reciprocated and put her hand on his shoulder. Her touch made him feel hot. Sweat dripped on his forehead, and his heart started to pump like a fiery motor. No matter what he said, his emotions and feelings were all over the place. Charles was a temperamental man, and his wife liked that very much. "I have to go. If you need me, I'll be in touch." Adriana got up from the table, cleared the dishes, and headed for the exit. "Okay, love," Charles nodded. "I have to leave in an hour too. The farm has asked me to check the equipment. They've been having problems pumping milk there for a few days now." "That's weird. Christina didn't tell me anything about it. I saw her the other day, and she didn't say a word." "Who's to ask? Every day is like a new page in her life. She forgets about everything. Besides, she doesn't care about the equipment. She doesn't know anything about it. And if she can get away from work, she'll be all over the farm all day." "How do you know all this?" Adriana said thoughtfully. "Sometimes it seems to me that you have much more valuable information, and you keep it to yourself on purpose to present it at the most unexpected moment." "Maybe. And I don't deny it," Charles agreed. "But you still know everything that happens in our village. Nothing and no one gets past you. You're bound to notice. That's a very useful skill. Otherwise, I'd be under a lot of bullshit." "Yeah, I don't disagree with you there." "All right, I'll see you tonight, if you don't get home before then." Adriana waved goodbye and left the house. Charles looked out the window and followed her lovingly to the gate. When she stopped in front of the fence, she sighed heavily and shook her head. Her gloomy thoughts of Kathy seemed to have returned to her, and the good start of the day was replaced by grave reflections. Turning down the walk, she reached the end of the street and found herself in front of the village store, remembering what she wanted to buy. She walked briskly inside and faced her friend head-on. Kathy carried a black bag in her hand. She lowered her head low. Adriana blocked her path and said hello softly. "I haven't called in a while." "You're all right." "Hi, Viola," Kathy answered. "I just forgot. I had a lot on my plate. It's just been swirling around." "Wow. I never used to complain about memory problems. I still don't." "Yeah, I get it. My words turned out to be nothing to you." Adriana shook her head. "What makes you think that?" Kathy didn't hold back and raised her voice, raising her head and looking her straight in the face. Adriana flinched at what she saw. Her friend had circles under her eyes and with a yellow tint to them, and that told her that they had been fisted. Not violently, but it was still there. In addition, Kathy's face showed the loss of tears, as if she'd been sobbing all night, maybe for days. "I can't believe my eyes. This is just some kind of horror. Does he really have a heart of stone? I don't want to discuss my husband, and let's forget about what happened. It's better for everyone. Like my grandmother used to say, you know less, you sleep better. She was right, but in your case you can't keep silent. Adriana shook her head. What are you going to do? With concern in your voice, asked Kathy. Our police officer has been informed about it. But don't bring Jacob into this. He's got enough on his plate without me. And if you really want to help, just calm down and don't go anywhere. Are you serious? Yeah, absolutely. And I have nothing to complain about. It seemed that Mason had not only proven himself to be the boss of the house, but had also brainwashed his wife. Kathy was acting like she'd been hypnotized. Perhaps she'd made herself believe that she and her husband were completely idyllic, but it wasn't, and the faint bruises under her eyes were proof of that. Adriana looked at her and did not understand what could have happened to her friend. What had made her so docile? Had Mason used some special methods of influence? She didn't have an answer to that question yet, but inside she was seething with anger. Adriana had tried to go with Kathy to her house and beat her up, but at the last minute she refused and stepped under her arm. Okay, I won't keep you. I thought you were in a hurry. Yeah, I have to get home right away. And Mason's coming over for dinner, and I haven't cooked anything yet. As she left the store, Kathy lowered her head again, quickened her step, and within a minute was turning into the prologue. Adriana gave her a hard look, then went to the clerk and asked for a bottle of juice. She arrived at the office before the meeting started and prepared for it by checking the reports. The head of the administration gave her the first word, and Adriana read out the important information. The other officials responsible for various aspects of life in the village spoke immediately after her. All in all, the usual routine of village administration was going on, and nothing extraordinary was expected. But it was after the meeting that Adriana ran into Mason in the corridor. He was walking towards her with his head held high, and to knock the gold dust off him, she grabbed the collar of his shirt and asked menacingly, "What on earth do you think you're doing? I don't understand what you're talking about." Mason replied calmly, turning on the fool. "I'll explain. Only on the street they will see how a woman pressed you against the wall, and then they will laugh. So be it. Maybe she's in love. Yeah, sure. That's all I need." Adriana pushed Mason toward the exit, and once they were on the porch, she asked again, "Who gave you permission to hit and humiliate a woman? I never laid a finger on you. All you can do is look at me and nail me to the ground." "That's right, and I'll have no trouble dealing with you," Adriana threatened him. "Don't scare me. I'm not the last man in this village," Mason said proudly. "And if they find out who is, I don't think you'll even know what hit you. And don't try to hide behind your connections. They won't help you." "You think so? Maybe I got a trump card. You have nothing but your worthless soul on the sea of eyebrows and flashing eyes," replied Adriana. "If you've decided to stick up for Kathy, you're trying in vain." Mason blurted out, "I've decided what I'm going to do with her. And if you're going to be a nuisance, I'll tell your infantile husband how to make his wife obey. He and I don't have a problem with that. But you're right to point out that I don't try hard enough." "In what way?" "That's what I mean. Don't thank me." I hit him below the waist with my knee. He almost fell to the ground, but she grabbed him by the collar and put him on the bench. "Breathe a little. You can't be nervous now, can you? Well, you don't have to go on. And by the way, and I'll convey your intentions to my husband and see what he says to that." "I was kidding. Sorry about, rereading Mason. It's too late for that." Adriana waved him off and walked back into the office. Mason remained seated on the bench, nervously pressing his hand against the spot where the blow had struck. He hadn't expected her to charge between his legs, but now he no longer had any doubts about her physical strength, and what people had said about her stern and fiery temper was true. Adriana could really give any man in the village a head start. Her father had taught her that, having once led a self-defense section at the local school. Noah taught the younger generation to stand up for themselves. Adriana also went to his classes and soon beat the boy for tearing her notebook, and her father forbade her to use the skills she had learned on her peers. Not only that, refused further visits to the sections. But this did not prevent Adriana from continuing to practice Sambo. True, after her father's warning, she had to secretly go to the gym. And it was the best time of her life. She was happy about her own successes, and when she performed at the competition and took the second place, her father cried and said that with persistence and perseverance you are like me. And if you do not stop, you will achieve a lot in this life. Exactly 5 years ago, he passed away. He died of a heart attack, but not forever remembered these words, and never stopped trying to achieve her goals. For that she was praised and respected in the administration, and people like Mason also feared her. It all combined to give her the confidence that she was on the right track. Having finished the main business in the office, Adriana was already at home at 3 o'clock. Fortunately, her husband had returned by then. He had put off the equipment at the firm and received a good bonus for it, not putting it aside and not holding anything back. She told him about the incident that had occurred with Mason. The latter listened attentively and said angrily, "You were wrong to get involved, of course, but thanks for the warning. I'll take it into account, and I'll talk to him sometime without prying eyes." While you're thinking about it, Kathy might get hurt even more, Adriana objected. "All right, I'll go to him right now and find out," Charles suggested. "No, don't. He's had enough of me. I'll tell you what I suggest. We should find her brother and tell him everything." "Where are you gonna find him? You said he left home when he was 18. Those were Kathy's words. I didn't see it myself. Adriana shook her hands. "Exactly. So I don't think you're going to get anywhere," Charles shrugged. "Are you doubting me, or are you scared of Mason? You're going to say that I can stand up for you and me. You just don't see it. I see it all, my love, but it makes it so much easier for me to keep our family safe. I learned to fight in my time, and now I'm not afraid of anyone. What a fighting wife you are, aren't you?" Charles complimented her and hugged her gently. "Thank you. I am pleased to hear that." Adriana nestled against his chest and gave a faint cry. A specific plan. She didn't have a plan for finding William, but she knew someone who might be able to help. They had been in the same class in their younger years and had attended her father's Sambo section together. Liam was considered to be a promising and hopeful student, but in the end he still lost at the competitions. However, this circumstance did not affect his further sports activities, and after a while Liam achieved his goals. He won gold at the regional tournament. Victory among strong and equal opponents inspired him to great achievements. A year later, he was allowed to open his own section. Slowly, it began to gain momentum, and soon it grew to a large sports center. Liam became not just a qualified coach, but also a businessman. And given the specifics of his activity, he quickly gained the necessary connections. He was attracted by people from the criminal world, who needed to keep themselves in shape all the time. And soon Liam began to be invited to visit authoritative personalities. He did not refuse and showed them everything he was capable of. As a result, he was granted permanent protection. Liam no longer worried that his sports center might be shut down. Everyone in town knew who came to see him. Remembering her old high school buddy, Adriana decided to go to him. He was in the kind of circles where William could go. All the more so because she had no other options. However, she did not tell her husband about it, but only said that she would ask her former classmate to help with the search. Meanwhile, Mason had come to his senses and had already thought of a plan to get back at Kathy. She waited for him all day, thinking he'd be here by lunchtime, but he didn't show up until evening, and she knew from his grim face that there was going to be a scandal, but she didn't know why. I mean, Mason could have gotten into an argument out of nowhere, putting a hot dinner and a full shot in front of him. She mistakenly hoped he'd eat and calm down. Instead, Mason threw the plate, and it fell to the floor with a clatter. Wash up. I've got a nerve. My dear Kathy's eyes rounded. It's borscht. You always asked me to make it for dinner. It's not cooked well. It stinks. He went on. You're going to get your way. You're a worthless hostess, and you'll sleep in the bathhouse tonight. What am I being punished for? Kathy sat down on a chair, covered her face with her hands and sobbed. But Mason was not moved by this. He began to call her even more hurtful words. Then he grabbed her by the collar of her blouse and threw her out of the house. As she fell on the steps, she put a hand to her right side and winced in pain. It took her a few minutes to regain consciousness. Fixing her robe on herself, Kathy stood up and, with a considered gait, headed for the bathhouse, closing the door behind her so Mason wouldn't burst in and finish her off. She sat down on the bench and cried again. She had no more hope of escape, and at that moment she said these words. How wrong was I, Adriana, not to have listened to you? And as if through from a distance, her friend heard her pleas, clutched at her heart. She sighed heavily and looked around. There were only a few people on the bus, and none of them paid any attention. But the appearance of Charles could raise a lot of questions. That was why Adriana had chosen public transportation from the village to the city, but she was glad for it. It took her almost an hour to get there before they reached the station, and in order not to waste time, she did not call a cab and went to the sports center. 20 minutes later, they were there and Liam personally came out to greet her. Hi, Adriana. What a surprise you've given me. Hello, Liam. She answered his greeting. To be honest, I didn't expect that I would have to come to you. Life is such a thing that you don't know where you will find and where you will lose. The satisfied smile of my old friend inspired optimism and hope that I would be able to get his support. I'm not just here to grind meat. I've got important business to attend to, and it doesn't wait long. I'm not surprised. No one comes to me out of boredom. Let's go to the office and you can tell me all about it. Letting her go, Liam followed at a leisurely pace. One could see that he was holding one hand in tension, and that suggested his serious status. In fact, he was in constant readiness to repel an attack. And even now he did not allow himself to relax, despite the fact that a former classmate had come to visit him. In his office, he offered her a cup of coffee, but she declined. No, I don't feel like it. Let's just get down to business, no problem. I'm all yours. Having received his approval, she didn't bother to tell him, and first of all emphasized that help was needed immediately. Liam listened to her attentively, not missing a single word. It seemed that he felt Kathy's distress and even wept a little. He immediately took a handkerchief out of his pocket and put it to his eyes. I've upset you, cautiously asked Adriana. A little, but it's all emotion, Liam nodded. You can't put them to work, as they say. You said he might have turned to crime, but that's kind of an assumption. And that's what Kathy said. But she doesn't really know anything. Why don't I solve her problems? Come down to your village and give that Mason a good shake. No, you don't. I've already put it between his legs. Adriana shook her head. He'll remember it for a long time. Good for you. What do you think? Liam complimented her. I'll do my best, but I can't promise anything. The most important thing is that you didn't refuse. To be honest, I was not sure of the success of my plan until the last moment. You know, it hurts me to see Kathy humiliate herself. She's been through enough. Her mother abandoned her, then her grandmother raised her. But after she died, distant relatives repossessed the house. She was left without a place to live at all. I'll pull up all my connections, I promise. But I will find my brother. I don't care if he's gone criminal or whatever. Not a needle in a haystack. Give me a few days, and I'll let you know what I find. Thank you, Liam. You've been a great help, putting your arm around his shoulders. She almost cried. Don't. You're a strong woman. He tried to calm her down. If you want, you can remember your younger days and stretch a little in the ring. What do you say? No, I think I'll pass. I'm past the time when I used to show my strength to the fullest. All I do now is chase parasites once in a while. Occasionally. Come on then. I'll show you how my Arkans train. Liam led her to the main hall, where besides the training machines there was a big ring. 2 wrestlers were sparring on it. Neither of them wanted to give in, so they gave their best. Adriana watched with excitement, and at some point nostalgia kicked in, but she was able to resist the temptation to spar as well. For about an hour, a former classmate gave her a tour, showing off the entire facility at the sports center. And not that he was bragging, but there was still a certain amount of pride. After all, it was all created by his hands, and Liam was glowing with happiness that he had managed to occupy such a high position in society. Adriana appreciated his way of life and hinted that sometime she would come and try to show her skills in the ring. In the meantime, she had to pack for the return trip. Thanks again for agreeing to help. I never thought I'd come to you after all these years. I told you about the lost and found. So it's no surprise. Liam smiled. I'll be waiting for your call. Hopefully William will be found. I shrugged and got in the car. I'll get him out of the ground, but your friend will meet her brother soon. Liam kept his promise. Even though he had to raise all the representatives of crime, they, of course, were surprised that he suddenly needed to look for a stranger, but did not refuse to help, and in 3 days provided all the necessary information. It turned out that William and really connected his life with crime. True, he did not achieve a high status, but had certain preferences from influential people. And so when he was informed that his sister was in danger, which he had not remembered since then, William immediately rushed to Liam and asked him to take her to Kathy. He agreed, but on a condition. You will do everything you can to make sure she doesn't suffer anymore. And I realize you had your reasons for leaving home. We won't discuss that now. The important thing is to save your sister as soon as possible. You'll work things out with her husband, but preferably in a non-criminal way. How? I don't know. Think. Liam shook his head. Take a couple of my guys and go to this village and talk to Mason and convince him that he's wrong. And that's no way to treat a wife. I understand, but I don't need your men. I can handle it, and you don't have to worry. He won't torture my sister anymore, William said angrily, clenching his fists. That's different. Do it. That same day, William set out to meet his sister, but in order not to get lost in the village, he first arrived at Adriana's house. She rounded her eyes when she saw him. I didn't realize you were as powerful as you are. What nature bestowed? He shrugged. Or Dad? I never knew him. My mom never told me anything about him. Will you show me where Kathy lives? Sure. That's why Liam found you at my request. Adriana nodded. You should have shown up sooner, shouldn't you? You knew your sister was alone. I'm sorry, but I had a good reason, and I can't give it to you right now. Well, that's your own business. I won't pry. Come on, let's go surprise Kathy. I can't wait to see her. William smiled. Charles was busy at the farm, so Adriana went alone to see him off with Kathy. William was silent the whole way. When they reached the house where his sister lived, he became nervous. But when he saw Kathy bruised and in tears, he had a plan of action. Without thinking, William dragged Mason out into the yard, especially since he was also in the house, and with the help of his legs he rolled him all the way to the vegetable garden. And at that moment his sister's hands were on his shoulders. Don't. Brother, let him live. Kathy cried, and at the same time rejoiced that fate had finally brought them together. Forgive me, sister, for not coming for so long. William sobbed too, hugging her tightly by the shoulders. It's all right. I'm alive. And that's the most important thing. It's so nice to look at you. Adriana cried with them. My soul was overflowing with happiness. Suddenly, Mason stirred and tried to get up. However, a lightning-quick kick to the chest from Adriana nailed him to the ground again. William rounded his eyes and shook his head approvingly. Exactly right, and most importantly, non-fatal. I still have a lot of ideas about how to deal with him. Don't. I've got it all figured out, and I'm ready to divorce Kathy. Mason pleaded, clasping his hands to his chest. You'll do that. But first, you'll answer for abusing my sister. I've been told everything. So look for the fifth corner. Because I'm gonna hit you gently, but hard. But Kathy convinced her brother not to hurt Mason, and he barely made it out of the village. Miraculously avoiding reprisals, William didn't go after him. He just warned the right people. And the tyrant received a warm welcome in town. What was done to him? It remains a mystery. But a month later, Kathy got a divorce. Besides, Mason put his house on the market for a ridiculous price, and William bought it. Now her sister was a full-fledged mistress in it, and soon it played with new colors. Kathy got rid of all the things that reminded her of her ex-husband and started a new life. True, without any plans for a new family relationship. She needed to come to her senses and finally recover. And as always, she needed help. Best friend Adriana. William went to the city, where he settled under Liam's wing. He had new goals and perspectives, and first of all, his sister's peace of mind, especially since she was now close to him and could always count on his support.
Subscribe and click the bell.
God, where is she? Why isn't she answering? Samuel couldn't find a place to go, waiting for his wife to call. What's going on over there? They know I'm worried. Suddenly the phone came to life, and the man grabbed the receiver. Samuel! He heard his wife's voice. Don't worry, please. Susan? The angry husband ranted. Where the hell have you been? Why aren't you answering your phone? I don't know where to go or what to do. Samuel, congratulations. We have a baby girl. What? I don't understand. The husband is dumbfounded. What girl? A daughter. Susan laughed happily. We had a daughter. Wait, but it's a month away, isn't it? It just happened. I guess I got banged up on the road and went into premature labor. That's why I couldn't call you. Don't worry, she's fine. She was born healthy and beautiful. What do you mean? Don't worry? My husband was furious. I persuaded you not to go to your mother. No, you carried 300 kilometers away, and without me. I knew that this whole thing would not end well. But I had to visit my mom. My wife justified herself. It's not such a long distance. It all worked out. The doctors and nurses here are marvelous. They treat me like a piece of paper. What are you talking about? There's a private clinic waiting for you here. We picked it out together. I paid for it a long time ago. It's no big deal. You'll get your money back. Believe me, it's no worse than the one in town. So tell me where this hospital is right now. I'm on my way right now. I won't leave you for a minute. You must see good doctors. Susan dictated the address to Samuel. Holy Mother! He cursed when he saw that the hospital was located in some godforsaken district center. Where the hell did you go? Okay, wait. I'm on my way. Susan stood at the window, watching the snow fall outside. Her newborn daughter was sleeping peacefully beside her. Susan, how are you feeling? A nurse came into the room. I'm fine. The woman smiled gratefully. My daughter is sleeping. My husband should come to pick us up soon. He was upset that I gave birth early. Lucky you and your husband. The nurse sighed. He's caring. Yes, we have been waiting 10 years for this child. We have been everywhere, checked everything. The tests were great, but we couldn't get pregnant. Do you know how painful it was to look at the moms who refused to give up their babies? We are young and healthy, cannot give birth to a baby, and these woeful moms, God gave such happiness, and they refuse it. And now the woman came to the crib and looked affectionately at the girl. We are happy to, the three of us. It's a shame about the refuseniks, the nurse said. I have so much milk. Susan laughed suddenly. There's enough for two. To tell you the truth, I've always dreamed of having twins so we could have two kids at once. The joy of all the years of waiting. Susan? The woman asked, hesitating. There's a little boy in the room, a sweet boy. His mother died in childbirth, and we haven't even seen his father. If you have a lot of milk, maybe you would agree to feed him. I have to pump anyway. Oh, and of course, bring him quickly. The young mother agreed. But he must have grandparents, right? They should, but Lisa, the boy's mother's name, said no one wanted her and her son. That's terrible. Poor thing. Tears came to Susan's eyes. Don't worry, you'll lose your milk. The nurse was scared. I feel fine. Bring the boy in. 5 minutes later, the woman returned with the baby in her arms, sucking greedily on the breast, looking at Susan with blue eyes. Little one. The woman said quietly and stroked the baby's head, kissed the pink cheek. Only 2 days of his life, and already he has experienced grief and betrayal, and now he is going to the orphanage. While we will stay with us, and then to the baby house, maybe someone will be lucky enough to adopt him. The boy is healthy, and his mom is not some alcoholic. Her kidneys failed, and here we do not have such equipment as in the city, so they did not save. She sighed sorrowfully. There was a noise in the corridor. What's going on in there? The nurse left Susan and walked out of the room. A man? She heard a woman. Where are you going? You can't go in the room. There are children in there. Let me through. The door opened and Samuel appeared on the threshold. My wife is here. Susan put her finger to her lips, still cradling the boy, who, because of the sudden sounds, let out his chest and was about to cry, wrinkling his nose funny. She pointed to the crib where their daughter was sleeping peacefully and continued feeding the baby. Susan? A nurse came into the room. Give me the boy. Daddy, you won't be here long, no visitors allowed. They're discounting the fact that you've traveled a long way. I got it. Thank you. The nurse took the baby away. Susan. Samuel handed his wife a bouquet of flowers, kissed her, and then asked her sternly, "What was that just now?" Samuel, Susan whispered hotly. Let's take this boy, shall we? Are you crazy? The man marveled. Are you out of your mind? How could we take someone else's baby? My love, his mother died, and his relatives have written a refusal. Nobody wants him, you understand. We'll have a girl and a boy. That's great. Do you realize you're taking someone else's baby into the house? Samuel was really pissed off. What if it's sick or we can't handle it? Are you going to take it back? It's not like picking up a kitten on the street. It's a person. I get it. Susan looked at her husband pleadingly. We can handle it. His mom was a decent woman, not a drunk, not a drug addict. Okay. Samuel paced the room from corner to corner. I don't want to hear anything about him right now, you understand? I'm tired from the road. You're emotionally asking me to take in an orphan. Let's do it like this. The doctor said you're gonna have to stay here for a couple more days. We'll think it over with a cool head, and then we'll decide. Okay. Okay, Susan replied, looking at her husband with a rapturous gaze. I love you, and I love you. The man leaned over and kissed his wife, then walked over to the crib where their daughter was sleeping peacefully. Thank you for the baby. He leaned over the girl, scrutinizing her face. How long we've waited for this day. Yes, I'm very happy. We are both happy, and now I have to go. Samuel said regretfully, Your nurse is very strict. I'm afraid she'll kick me out. I'd better go myself. He smiled, went to his wife again, hugged her and kissed her. "Don't miss me, I'll come back tomorrow." Her husband left, and Susan did not sleep. She thought whether it was right to adopt a boy. Doubts did not give her peace. Finally, she got up and left the room. "Helen," she turned to the nurse on duty. "Don't forget to bring the rejected boy to me for feeding. There's nothing for you to do." The girl wrinkled her nose. "Feed yours. You'll be leaving soon anyway, and he needs to get used to the bottle. But you still bring it." The woman asked insistently. The nurse shrugged and went back to her work. Susan stood for a moment longer, then returned to the room. She had fed the babies twice during the night, and each time her heart sank when the boy was taken from her arms. "We're discharging you tomorrow." The attending physician said, "The tests are good. There's no point in keeping you here any longer." Good. Samuel was happy when his wife told him. "Let's go home at last, Samuel." Susan looked at her husband questioningly. "You promised to think about the boy. Do you still insist?" "I don't insist. It has to be our mutual decision. I'll give it up if you say no, but before you say anything, think carefully. Maybe fate has put it in our hands. We're hardly going to get a second one, age and all, and here's a chance. Don't you have a heart? He'll be alone. He'll be placed in an orphanage. Then maybe he'll be adopted. We don't know where he'll end up, but he'll be fine with us. We love him like family." "Okay." Ruffling the hair on the back of his neck, Samuel said, "Suppose we take him, but how will you explain his appearance to our relatives?" "I've got it all figured out." Encouraged by Samuel's words, Susan hurried on. "We'll say I'm having twins, but how do you envision it?" The man clutched his head. "We told everyone we were expecting a girl." "So what?" "We can say that we just hid the presence of a second fetus. We wanted to make a surprise. But think about it. Who will find out the details?" "What about the parents?" Samuel doubted. "I think we should tell the parents the truth." "Well, Samuel, my beloved husband, what decision will we make?" "As you say, so it will be. I agree with your opinion." Ouch! He waved his hand. "Be what it will be. The boy needs a home, and we could use a second child." "Samuel!" Susan shrieked with joy so as not to wake her daughter and threw herself on her husband's neck. "I knew it. I knew you'd say yes. Do you know what paperwork the adoptive parents need to gather?" "I don't know, but I think our doctor can help with that." They left the room and went in search of a doctor. "Margaret?" The young men knocked at 6, entered the residence room. "We need to talk to you." "Go ahead." Samuel could see the question in her gaze and the shy hope in her eyes. "We're here about the abandoned boy." "What do you want to know?" "We're ready to adopt him." "Guys," Margaret splashed her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so happy for you and for him. You're great. I'm sure this child will bring you happiness." "We came to find out what documents we need to prepare, and also to ask when we can take him home." "I'll tell you everything." The doctor hurried away. "Here you go." She took out a long list of documents from some folder. "We can't get it all together in a year." Samuel exclaimed, "I understand." The woman was embarrassed. "But that's the way it is. We can't just give the baby away. We have to make sure you're healthy, that he won't need anything." We were just about to go home. Susan was confused. "What about the baby? You're not giving him to us now." "I'm sorry." The doctor waved her hand sadly. "We have to do all the paperwork first." "What do we do?" Susan looked at her husband in bewilderment. "You'll have to stay with your mom for a while," Samuel said. "We will calmly draw up the documents, here on the spot. Probably you can do it faster, and your return will look more natural. Don't worry, my love." He whispered in her ear, "We'll make it work. What about your job? I think I can stay for a week. At least we'll have time to go through the doctors, and we'll figure out the rest." They said goodbye to the doctor and talked about where to start. Then Susan called her mother and told her she was coming. Daughter. Vanessa ran out onto the porch to greet her dear guests. "Oh, I'm so glad. I never thought I'd see my granddaughter again. I thought you'd leave right away." "Mom." Kissing her, the young woman said, "We have something to talk to you about." "Come in. Why are you stuck outside? Father is all exhausted, waiting for you. He can't wait to wash his feet with his son-in-law." When the joyful fuss had died down, the parents and guests gathered in the living room. "Mom, Dad," Susan announced, "we've decided to adopt. It's an informed decision." The daughter gestured to stop her father, who was about to be outraged. "We've thought it over, but we don't want anyone but you and us to know that Hunter is a stranger to us by blood. Will you promise not to tell anyone?" "But my daughter," Vanessa tried to reason with the young parents, "are you sure you're doing the right thing? And how long will you hide from the baby that he is not your own? He must never know about it," Susan said firmly. The next day, the young people took the tests and went to the child welfare office. The head of the department read Samuel on a sign nailed to the door. "Helen, hello." They hesitantly walked into the office, where an elderly woman sat behind a desk. She gave them a stern look at the threshold. "Have you seen the appointment times for personal matters?" "We did." Samuel smiled disarmingly. "But maybe you could make an exception for us. We want to adopt a boy, so." The woman asked in a displeased tone, looking at them over her glasses. "Please leave my office and come back as scheduled." "What kind of person are you?" The man stormed out. "We're talking about a child. We can't wait. Every day he spends in the hospital is like a day in jail for an adult. Don't make your own rules. I'm not going to change my work schedule because of you. This conversation is over. She's up." "Please, Helen." Susan looked at her pleadingly. "Help, and we will not be in your debt." The woman suddenly softened. "All right, what child?" Rejoicing at the sudden change in the department head's mood, Susan described the situation. "Well, my darlings," the woman sat back in her seat. "First, gather all the certificates." She put a list in front of them. "No one will give you the baby without them. Isn't there any way to speed up the process?" "No way." The employee waved her hands. "Maybe you are some kind of criminals, and you will do a hell of a lot with the child. Or had a criminal record. We must also look at the conditions in which you live, whether your income allows you to support the baby. Think about it." Samuel was getting more and more annoyed. Would we take a child if we didn't know what we could do? "I don't know, it's not written on you." Helen was adamant. "If you get the certificates, come back and we'll set a court date." "What trial?" "Well, it's all through the court. The child didn't fall out of the sky into your hands. What if the relatives want to bring him up themselves? They've already written a waiver. That's the way it's supposed to be, and stop arguing, or I'll think you're mentally unstable." "Samuel," Susan whispered pleadingly in her husband's ear, "don't argue with her, or they won't give Hunter back." "Well," roughly asked the woman, settling back into the chair, "why are you standing up? Go get the certificates. If you haven't changed your mind, I'm not going to collect them for you." Right away, they claimed to be in a hurry, but they froze like a statue. The young people left the office, shocked by the cold reception. "Old bitch," Samuel scolded. "There's nothing human left. If you want to do a good deed, you'll come across such bookish people, and you'll send the whole system to hell." "Darling, why are you so angry?" His wife tried to calm him down. You can understand them too. They stand guard of the law. We are strangers. No one knows us here. No one to vouch for us. How many like us have passed through her hands? You'd think they'd look at the certificates and know us better. Calm down, please. We'll get this paperwork together, and we'll all go home together. We have a lot of paperwork to put up with. 3 whole months went by without a hitch. Samuel and Susan were worried because the court hearing was tomorrow. The adoption case was being heard. The clerk announced. The judge read the application, familiarized herself with the certificates that the young family provided. "Why do you need this child?" she asked. "You have a daughter. Why do you need a stranger?" "Listen," Samuel spoke. "We couldn't have children for a long time, and we are unlikely to have a second one. We are not 18 years old. This boy is a gift from heaven. Can't you understand?" "Don't get excited." The judge stopped him. "Answer in substance. There is a certain order, and I ask you to follow it. We want to help the child." Susan answered firmly. "To find a family. We have the means. You've seen our documents. We have the will and we have everything." Susan's eyes filled with tears. "I fell in love with him immediately because I had to feed him with my milk. I'm his milk mom, if you know what I mean." "I do." The judge looked at the young couple intently. "And if things don't work out, you can't take him back to the orphanage. It would be a tragedy for the baby." "No, it wouldn't. No one's going to give him up," Susan assured me fervently. "We already love him like his own and can't wait to take him home." The judge looked at Samuel, then looked at Susan and said, "I believe you for some reason. I hope I haven't misjudged you." The court recessed for deliberation. The clerk announced. A representative of the guardianship authorities followed the judge into the deliberation room. "All rise, the court is in session." The clerk again announced, "The application for adoption is granted," solemnly pronounced the judge. "Thank you." Susan whispered, fell back in her chair and sobbed. "Why are you crying?" Smiling, Margaret asked her. "Everything is fine now. The boy will go with you." "Congratulations." She took Susan's crying hand and shook it reassuringly. "When can we pick up our son?" The new father asked. "We can't wait to introduce him to his new home. If within 10 days none of the relatives will make a claim, then the child can be taken away." The judge looked at him carefully and said respectfully, "And in general, you are, of course, good to take someone else's child for upbringing not everyone will dare. Usually they are abandoned and rarely taken into the family." "They are not good." Helen joined the conversation. "They have no idea what awaits them. We don't know what kind of heredity this boy has," she said glumly, as if they would not have to bite their elbows later and run to us and ask us to reverse the case. We've known such people, and then the children suffer all their lives, then in orphanages. "Why did you do that?" Margaret told her off. "Everything will be fine. You can see that people are responsible. They took this step consciously, and you can take the boy right now, without waiting for the 10 days to expire." The relatives, if they wanted to, have long ago announced themselves and claimed the rights to the child. So go home quietly, settle in, happiness for you and the children. She said a warm farewell to the parents of the babies. The next day, Susan and Samuel came to the maternity hospital and picked up the boy. "Meet." Smiling happily, the woman announced as they entered her parents' home, "This is Hunter, your grandson." Her husband placed the bundle on the table, undressed the boy. He looked at the adults around him with both curiosity and fear. Then, unexpectedly, he roared in a bass voice, tapping his little hands and feet. The adults laughed. "Susan?" Vanessa asked her daughter, When the passions had subsided and the children, washed and fed, slept in the crib. What are we going to tell the relatives? After all, everyone was expecting a girl, and then a boy came out of nowhere. How can you explain this phenomenon? It's a bit of a mystery, so I'll have to tell them. I'm afraid some people won't approve of your decision to adopt a boy. Mom, we've already thought of everything. No one from the relatives, except you, my parents and Samuel, must not know that Hunter is not our own. We have to try to forget that we adopted him like it never happened. After all, he's our son now. His real parents' names are only on the adoption certificate. How do you forget that? You can't lie your whole life. As the years go by, you'll realize they're not related, they don't look alike. We won't tell, but are you sure Samuel's parents won't tell anyone the secret of the boy's birth? I'm afraid that one day there will be trouble. When will that be? Susan dismissed it. For now, we're sticking to the legend that I gave birth to twins. Why couldn't it have been? I wonder, twins. The mother snorted incredulously. How did we get twins? And why didn't you say anything the whole pregnancy? I didn't say anything so that no one would envy our happiness or jinx it. If someone asks in whose family was twins, say on the husband, no one will not check. How can you hide something like that? Oh, daughter, this is not a good idea. And if someone finds out, can you imagine what a blow to the boy would be? If someone told him one day that he wasn't your kin, you can't hide anything from the neighbors. You won't even be able to visit without a care. That's why Susan reassured her. The only people who know about the adoption are you and us. The fewer people who know what we're doing, the better chance we have of keeping it a secret. No one in the village has ever seen me pregnant, so there will be no questions about where another baby came from, and we can visit you in peace. And if someone from the maternity hospital blabbed about it, you can't put a handkerchief on every mouth. Mommy, Susan hugged her mother. Even if some information leaks out, they'll forget it over time. And as for guests, you can come and stay as long as you like. You know you're always welcome. As the years went by, the children grew up, and their differences became more and more apparent. Listen, Susan. One day her cousin asked her, watching her nephews play on the playground, "Why is Hunter's hair so black and his eyes brown?" "I'm surprised. You and Samuel are both blonde, and Nancy is blonde, so who does he look like?" Samuel's parents have dark hair. Susan felt a chill inside. She didn't pay attention to little things like that. You saw them. Oh, who knows about genes? How am I supposed to know whose breed Hunter is? Personally, I don't care. Look how smart that boy is. But he and his sister look nothing alike. So what? Nancy's our breed and Hunter's his father's. It's still strange. The woman eyed the boy suspiciously. Are you sure you didn't have your baby switched at the hospital? I saw a program on TV the other day where several families suffered because of negligent nurses. Imagine, only to find out that the children were accidentally switched. Don't be ridiculous. Susan told her off. What are you doing with my kids? Have your own and put them under a microscope. It's like, it's not like. Even if it is, nature is so inexplicable. Doesn't it happen that babies don't look much like their parents? If I were you, I'd get a DNA test, see if they're really switched. Brother and sister can't be so different, but if you gave birth to them from Samuel, they are. She laughed. Are you out of your mind? How could that thought even enter your head? What should I think? The relative excused herself. I could be offended by such words. Come on. The woman poked Susan in the side conciliatingly. I was joking. Next time, doubts visited the kindergarten teacher. Susan? She asked with a laugh. I look at your babies and I can't understand how the same parents have such different children. Nancy is such a creative girl, singing, dancing, and how she tells poems. Hunter is completely different, silent, no creative skills, but he's already solving math problems. Susan remarked sharply, "I don't get it. What are you implying?" No, I'm not implying anything." The young teacher was frightened. "I just can't understand why they don't even look alike. Because they're twins and twins can be different. In fact, leave my kids alone. Curiosity won't get you anywhere. Ask less questions. Do more with your kids." Susan said coldly, "I'm sorry." The teacher was embarrassed. "I didn't mean anything bad, but it's strange that they don't look alike at all, as if they came from different parents." Such conversations made Susan panic, and she tried to control herself and not get into an argument, proving that the man was wrong to question her children's parentage. Hunter and Nancy had been very friendly since childhood. If one of them was hurt, the other always came to the rescue. They were feared at school because the two of them could put any bully in his place, and yet sometimes there were situations that made their parents worry. "Mom?" Hunter asked one day, "What's your blood type?" "B positive." "And Dad?" "B positive." "Why do you ask?" "What's mine?" "You?" Susan hesitated and looked helplessly at her husband. "Yes." Waiting, looking at the parents, the son asked. "Today we talked about blood types in biology, and I don't know which one I have. You see." The woman was confused and then gathered herself and spoke cheerfully. "In the maternity hospital, and children do not determine the blood type if the R factor is positive. That's why we don't know exactly what yours is." "And what could be?" insisted son. "Any type. If you have studied this topic in biology, you should know that in our case, children can have any blood type." "How can I find out mine?" "You can get your blood analyzed and ask to have your blood type determined." Satisfied with his mother's answers, Hunter went about his business, while Susan poured herself a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. The older she gets, the more she asks questions that stump me. "Thank goodness you found something to answer," my husband remarked. "I'm afraid to guess what he'll ask next time." Time was running fast. The high school graduation came unexpectedly. Had we waited and our children would receive their diplomas today? Susan rejoiced, waiting for the celebration. "I can't believe how fast the school years have gone by." "I'm glad," Dad said, "that they already know where they're going to go. They're wonderful children." "Nancy will have a hard time." Mother smiled. The exact sciences were still unknown to her. Maybe she shouldn't have gone to an institute. A technical school was enough for a girl. Nothing. A good education has never hurt anyone. I'm glad that children help each other. Father remarked. Hunter won't leave her. You'll see she'll study for 2. The children went to university. Studying was not easy for the daughter at first, but Hunter studied with her sister in the evenings, and soon she began to make progress. "Sister, do you know where we have all the documents?" Hunter asked her once. "I need my passport urgently, and I have no idea where to find it." "Look in the cupboard. I think I've seen it there recently." Nancy responded. "Why do you need one?" "I want to enroll in a driving course. They don't accept applications without a passport," answered his brother, digging through the papers. So, Hunter listed aloud the documents he found. Marriage certificate, Mom's birth certificate, Dad's birth certificate. "Nancy, your certificate is also here in mine, and here's the passport." He shook it triumphantly in the air. "And what's this?" Hunter frowned as he read it. "An adoption certificate. and there was a tag from the maternity hospital with the date of his birth and his mother's name on it. Why are you so quiet? Nancy asked cheerfully, entering the room. What's wrong with your face? The girl asked, coming up close to her brother. Have you found the secret materials? She snatched the document out of his hands. What are you reading? Letters from the past. Well, adoption certificate. I wonder whose? Hunter. The girl turned pale after reading the contents of the document. Her brother stood with his teeth clenched tightly. His cheekbones were jaundiced. He forcefully clenched his fingers into a fist so that the knuckles turned white. This is yours. What do you mean? You're not my own. Adopted? She looked at her brother confused. It turns out that way. Muffle, the young man answered. And all this time you have lived with us as my own brother. Who are you then? Where are you from? And who are your parents? I don't know. Hunter looked at his sister confusedly. It was the first time he had seen this paper himself. That's the news. It's quite a sensation. Where did you come from? And why didn't our parents ever tell us about it? Why did they hide it? I know as much as you do. Hunter was shocked by the sudden revelation of the truth about his birth. I started to notice something was wrong with us a long time ago. Usually real brother and sister feel for each other, but I've never felt anything like that for you. I was always surprised, but now it's all falling into place. That's why you're nothing to me. Hunter stood looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. Well, why aren't you saying anything? Nancy was starting to get angry. You always kept silent when there was trouble, and now you are silent. And I couldn't understand why your father and mother lick you so much. Hunter this, Hunter that, everything for Hunter. They felt obligated, and Hunter took advantage of that. Nancy. Hunter said warningly, let's be quiet now, so that we don't say too much and regret it later. I don't like this whole situation either. This is my first time seeing this document just like you. I don't know when or why it all happened. At least, I don't remember. You might want to keep quiet for a while so I can think. I have yet to live with this. I'm in a worse position than you are, and you don't shut me up. The girl had already got into the role of a whistleblower and couldn't stop. Now a lot of things are explained. Like what? Why they bought you a brand new suit for the prom and I had to wear my cousin's dress. You don't think I wanted a new dress? I was going to the International Math Olympiad. That's why they bought me one, not for graduation. Don't you remember? So you're so smart. You get the best, and I'm stupid. It'll do. Why are you talking nonsense? No one thinks you're stupid. Our parents always buy us both something. They don't neglect anyone. Why are you trying to insult them now? Remember, she went after my brother. We got bikes in 8th grade. They got Hugh a new high-speed bike, and they got me a hand-me-down simple one. So we got a Hunter again, and that's fine for Nancy. You say it never happened. I was already a good rider, and you were just learning. Why would you need a fast one? Your parents wanted you to start riding properly, and you have an explanation for everything. Nancy said with a sneer, and if you hadn't been there, it would have been all for me. My parents wouldn't have to split it between the two of us. Do you remember when we didn't go to the camp at the sea? Why didn't we? It was expensive to send 2 people. You'd be a drag everywhere. Tears spurted from Nancy's eyes. Childhood resentments that had been piling up for years came flooding out like a cornucopia. She pounded Hunter's chest painfully with her fist, then pounded on him. He struggled to turn away from the blows. It's all because of you, and you're a nobody, adopted and from who knows where. If it wasn't for you, Mommy and Daddy would only love me. You stole their love from me. Nancy, you don't know what you're saying. The young man, looking at his crying sister, was ready to cry too, but held himself back. He was unbearably hurt by his sister's words and even more hurt by the truth he had learned. I know, the girl screamed. I know. I've had to share my parents' attention with you all my life. They treated me like a silly little girl, but you're a math star. You're smart, strong, and I'm just an app. Even at school, you're a role model, and no one ever paid attention to me. You have your own talents. Hunter tried to calm her down. Why are you trying to insult me now? It's hard enough as it is. Believe me, I don't like this whole situation, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Your parents always put you first, but in reality, you're nothing and your name is nothing. You're a stranger to us. Get out of our house. There's nothing here for you. Dad and Mom are mine, understand? And you go back to yours. Where are they? They abandoned you. They abandoned you, and they took pity on you. A poor orphan, a foundling. I hate you, I hate you. She rushed to her room, fell on her bed, and wept. At these words, which sounded like a slap in the face, Hunter turned pale. All right then, he said. If that's the way you want it, I'll leave. I'll find my real parents and forget about you. I don't want anything from you, so live as you wish. Go away. Tears were streaming down his face as his sister ran after him. No one will be sorry for you. Do you expect me to run and beg you to stay? I won't. He threw some things into his backpack, took his laptop, and carefully folded the adoption certificate and tag. At the door, he looked back, said a silent goodbye, and walked out of the house that had become a stranger to him in an instant. Nancy shuddered when the front door slammed, jumped out of bed. Somewhere inside remorse awoke, but the girl quickly wiped the tears and tried to calm down. Gone, she said. So be it. She was pleased with herself. The childish resentments that had accumulated in her heart had finally come out. I should have told him a long time ago, and that's what he should do. I never want to see him again in my life. And my parents? How could they do that? They didn't consult me, didn't ask me if I even wanted a brother. She closed her eyes, still sobbing, and fell asleep, tired, devastated. She awoke to the sound of her parents' voices in the kitchen. They were discussing something animatedly, chuckling. Nancy got up, went into the bathroom, washed her tear-swollen eyes, then wandered into the kitchen. Her mother was busy at the stove. Daughter, Susan asked cheerfully, noticing her. Call your brother. We'll have dinner. I'm hungry. I can't eat. I think I could swallow a mammoth right now. What's the matter with you? Your eyes are red. Have you been crying? She looked at her daughter worriedly. I'll get her. Samuel answered. He went into his son's room and shouted from there. He's not there. It's strange. Nancy? He asked his daughter, coming back. Do you know where your brother is? Did you two have a fight? The mother looked at the girl sternly. He is not my brother. Nancy replied glumly, sitting down at the table. What? The parents exclaimed with glee. Are you overheated in the sun? What do you hear? The girl replied swaggeringly, starting to eat. Don't pretend to be surprised. I know everything. He's nobody to me. Stand up when you talk to your parents. The mother turned pale and forced her daughter to rise from the table. What are you talking about? What happened between you two? Tell me now, why do you care about him so much? He's not your own son. Hunter found the adoption certificate. We talked to him for a while. She briefly recounted her conversation with Hunter. He left. I think he did the right thing. It's not his home, and you cheated me. I thought of him as my brother for 20 years, and he's a stranger who's been put into my family by someone else's grace, and you forgot to ask me if I wanted a brother. Are you out of your mind? Mother was furious. How could we ask you? You were just born then, both of you. Why didn't you tell us later? Why didn't we talk? Nancy insisted. Listen, daughter. Susan could hardly control herself. Maybe it's our fault for not talking to you sooner, and we certainly didn't expect it to come out so suddenly. But it's our decision, and it has nothing to do with you, much less Hunter. It's not his fault he was orphaned from birth. I didn't expect you, daughter, to throw a man out of his home. Tell me now, where could Hunter have gone? Father was out of his mind. If anything happens to him, I will never forgive you. How should I know? Nancy shrugged her shoulders irritably. He probably went to look for his real mother, and rightly so. There's nothing for foster children to do in our house. Let him go to hell. I won't cry. Susan, not expecting you herself, swung around and slapped her daughter. Mom, the girl grabbed her cheek. Tears came to her eyes from the pain. You hit me? Your own daughter hit me because of some prodigal. How can you do this to me? Do you love him more than me? Don't you dare call him that. Susan shouted in anger. You don't know anything. She fell back in her chair. You don't know anything. The woman cried. He has no one. His mother died in childbirth. There was no father, and his relatives refused. I fed him milk with you. I'm his milk mother, and he's not a stranger to us. I don't understand how you can be so callous. He's nobody to me. Nancy was stubborn. Maybe I'm a stranger to you, too. Rubbing her reddened cheek, she asked, You wouldn't beat a native, and all because of that Hunter. Well, kiss your favorite, of course. He's the best. You're wrong. Trying to pull himself together, my father said, If you think we love him more than you, we've never made any distinction between you. Remember, if we punished both of you, we praised you too. Remember how Hunter defended you if we were angry. He was willing to take punishment for you. Remember how he took the hit when a tree in the forest almost fell on you during a thunderstorm. He had his back to you. You little fool. You jealous little girl. You were at camp, don't you remember? He broke his arm then. He had to wear a cast for a month during the summer. Of course you forgot. Your empty head only remembers the wrongs, but not the good. I remember. Nancy's lips quivered. And you're still defending him now. I mean nothing to you. What are you talking about, silly? Her father put his arms around her, sat her down beside him on the couch, wiped away her tears. And remember, you were still small. Before Christmas we punished you and left you without sweets, and he gave you his present, and you sat under the table, eating candy, and thought we could not see anything. And after all that, you say he's not your own. How could you insult your brother? Yes, your parents are different, but sometimes strangers are much closer than family. If Hunter hadn't found that damn certificate, would it have occurred to you to question your parentage? You too couldn't be spilled with water. Mama, Papa. Nancy suddenly burst into tears. I'm such a fool. I've hurt Hunter. I'm selfish. He'll never forgive me. What have I done? He will. Susan took her daughter's hand. He will. We just have to find him first. Let's think together about where he might have gone. You know, the father asked, which kids is he friends with the most? Classmates? Neighbors? You know his neighborhood better than we do. Think of names, phone numbers, places you've been. Yes. Now. Wiping away her tears, Nancy started calling her friends. Hello, Ethan. Do you have Hunter? I can't get through. My parents are worried. If you have any, tell them to call me right away. She hung up. I haven't seen her. call someone else. Susan interrupted her. Nancy dialed number after number, but each time she flailed her arms helplessly. No one had seen him. She roared again. What do we do? He'll come back, won't he? Mom, Dad, tell me, will he come back? Will we find him? There's nothing to do at home, Samuel said. I suggest we go to the yards. Dad got up, started to get dressed. Maybe he's sitting on a bench somewhere now, hesitating to go home, resentment getting in the way. He doesn't know that Nancy's head is back on straight. What a mess you've made of things, daughter. Father shook his head reproachfully. I know. Like a straw, the mother grasped at the suggestion. Let's go look for him, ask around, see if any of the neighbors have seen him. He couldn't have disappeared without a trace. They went to all the nearest yards, but Hunter seemed to have vanished into thin air. Okay, Samuel was determined. Now it's late. It's pointless to go through the yards. It's unlikely to spend the night on a bench. Probably hiding somewhere. Let's wait till morning. Maybe his son will show up. After all, he's a sensible man. And if he doesn't? Susan looked painfully at her husband. He had been wronged, and God only knows what was going on in his head. Nancy has told him so much. If he doesn't come back, we'll go to the police in the morning. It's useless to look for him ourselves. Let the professionals do it. They went home and went to their rooms. Mother woke up from every rustle. But Hunter did not appear, did not call, did not send a message. The night passed without sleep, waiting. It was our own fault, Susan said in the morning as she made breakfast. For some reason we left the documents in a prominent place. We should have destroyed them immediately. I asked you to. I've forgotten all about them. My father lamented. I never thought that someone would need to go through old papers. Well, now it's too late to sprinkle ashes on your head. Let's have breakfast and go to the police. What about me? Nancy asked, wrapped in a blanket and squinting her sleepy eyes. You stay home and wait for your brother. Keep your cell phone on you, and if he shows up, call him right away. You got it? Okay. Parents, I'm sorry. She said it guiltily. We're not the ones you need to apologize to. Susan and Samuel drove to the police station, her father driving silently, staring at the road. Nothing bad should happen to him, right? Susan asked suddenly. Of course not. He's an adult. He always weighs his every move. He thinks straight. He'll get by. They drove up to the police station. Our son is missing. The mother said, We've got a missing son. We want to file a report. How old is the child? Asked the officer on duty, without taking his head from filling out the log. 20. You what? The policeman immediately took his eyes off his notes. Are you kidding me? I don't understand you. Susan was taken aback by this strange reaction. The boy is an adult. The policeman grinned. Couldn't he go out with his friends or stay at a girl's house? Why are you panicking? We've got enough work to do without your great young man. Wait, he'll be back tonight. Maybe you shouldn't be so quick to file a report. Are you refusing to accept our application? Susan looked at him suspiciously. No. The desk clerk was embarrassed. Of course you write it, we'll take it. But what if you come back now and your son is already at home sleeping after a stormy night? What are you saying? The worried mother was indignant. Hunter would never do such a thing in his life. He doesn't drink at all and always warns me if he's going to be late. But this time he didn't. The young man remarked reasonably. He didn't. Susan agreed. But this is a special case. Please help us bring our son home. We've hurt him very much. He's proud. He'll never come back on his own. Don't worry, we'll find your boy. The officer on duty reread the statement, attached a photo. Stay at home. If he shows up on his own, let us know at once to call off the search." Parents rushed home. "I wish I could." Susan spoke without blinking, staring at the road. "I wish the children were home now." "I wish that too." Samuel responded, "We should think about where he could go." They went up to the apartment and opened the door, hoping to see their son. "Didn't show up?" the mother asked from the doorstep. Nancy shook her head negatively. "Hunter, son." Susan went into the living room and sat down on the couch without undressing. "Where are you?" "Mom?" The daughter came to her mother, hugged her. "Don't get upset. We'll get him off, you'll see." They sat together in the living room and waited for some news, but the phones were silent. Meanwhile, Hunter arrived at the bus station. "Hello. I need a ticket to." He glanced at the tag and named the city. The woman behind the window looked at him curiously, asked for his passport, punched the receipt, and handed him the ticket. "The bus is in 50 minutes, she informed him. The young man went into the station cafeteria, drank coffee, ate a couple of rolls, and wandered around the neighborhood. When he heard the boarding announcement, he got on the bus. Why? He thought to the peaceful whirring of the engine. Did my parents hide from me that I was not their own son? Why did they adopt me? And what will I say to my mother when I see her, and will I even be able to find her? What is she like? Maybe I should go back." Suddenly he thought, "No." He said firmly to himself, "I'm not going back. After what Nancy told me, I'll never go back. Turns out I didn't know her at all. How much resentment did she hold in her?" He sighed sorrowfully. Soon fatigue and worry took their toll, and in a few minutes Hunter dozed off, sitting comfortably in his chair. "Hey, boy!" Hunter woke up to someone shaking him by the shoulder. "Wake up, end of the line. The bus isn't going any farther. Get off, come on." "Ah!" The young man had barely recovered from his nap. "Sorry, I'm getting off." He rubbed his face, finally throwing off the remnants of sleep, picked up his backpack, bag with laptop, and got off the bus. He looked back and walked down the street. "Excuse me." He stopped a woman passing by. "I'm looking for this man." He said his mother's name. "Do you happen to know where she lives? Camille?" "I do. Of course I do." She grinned, looking at the boy with interest. "Everyone here knows her. Can you tell me how I can find her? And who are you?" "Never mind. Just tell me where to find her." "Go down this street. After 2 houses, turn right and go to the end. There's your Camille." "Thank you." Hunter hurried toward the house where he thought his mother lived. "Hey, boy!" The woman called out to him. "I'd think twice before making an acquaintance with someone like that if I were you." Hunter didn't answer anything, but walked to the given address. He was nervous for the upcoming meeting. The street was lined with well-built houses, and Hunter looked at them curiously. But the closer he got to the outskirts of the village, the slower his step became. The rich, well-kept houses were replaced by old, ramshackle huts, and Hunter stopped in front of one of them. Did someone really live here? The young man could not believe his eyes. A shriveled house among the tall and long ago not mown grass. The sun was reflected in the dirty, blinded windows. On a shabby plaque, nailed to the corner of the house, one could hardly see the number of the house. There was no doubt that this was the house he was looking for. Hunter opened the gate. With a horse barking, a chained dog jumped out of the booth. A neatly dressed, unshaven man came out. "What do you want?" "I'm looking for a stranger." Squinting into the sun, the man said, keeping his cigarette in his mouth. "I'm looking for Camille Clark. I was told she lives here." "Well, she does. But what do you want from her?" "She's my mom," Hunter said with one lip. The man dropped the cigarette from his mouth in surprise. "Camille, come here. Your son is looking for you." A couple of minutes later, a short woman came out on the porch. She was dressed in a stretched sweater, which was constantly coming off her shoulders, exposing a white t-shirt that had once been washed, a soiled robe sticking out from under the sweater, which reached her knees, worn barefoot. Trampled slippers completed the picture. She, fixing her dirty, disheveled hair, looked at the stranger attentively and spoke in a faltering tongue. "What are you doing, Bob? Have you eaten too much bleach?" "What son?" "I don't have one." She immediately shrieked in bed, having received a sensitive blow to the side from her roommate. "Come on in, boy." Hunter, the man, smiled broadly. "Your mother's sick. She's not thinking straight. And it's been a while. How old are you?" 20, replied Hunter, walking into the house. "She's been looking forward to seeing you, hasn't she, Camille?" He squeezed his friend's elbow warningly. "Yes, yes," agreed the woman, looking at her partner perplexed. "Come and sit down, and we'll set the table with your mother." Bob dragged Camille into the kitchen. "You almost ruined everything," he hissed at her. "Can't you see that? The kid's well dressed, so he must be from a rich family." "Well, he's not my son. I've never had kids." "Who cares now, stupid? If you're his mother's full namesake, we can capitalize on that resemblance. You know what I mean, dummy head." "But how?" "First of all, make up a sob story about why you had to give him up. We need to do everything we can to keep him here." "Why?" "We don't have enough to eat, and we've got an extra mouth to feed. He's a big boy. He needs to be fed." "What a fool you are. He's gonna feed us, so he can help his mommy a little. Now pretend to be a loving and suffering mother, a victim of human injustice. Go to him and pretend you've dreamed all your life of finding him." Hunter gingerly sat down on the worn sofa and looked around the room. "How can anyone live here?" he thought. "Why is it so dirty? It's like our place." He thought involuntarily, and then he stopped himself. "There's no us. I'm on my own. What's your name, child?" Camille appeared in the room. "Hunter." The young man went up to meet her. "Wow." The woman brushed away a tear. "I dreamed of naming my son Hunter, too. Apparently, God heard me and suggested this name to your foster parents." She walked over to the young man and took him into her arms. "Son, how happy am I to see you." She pulled away from him, scrutinizing him. "Tall, handsome, just the way I imagined you in my dreams. You have no idea how much I suffered for leaving you at the maternity hospital." "But why?" Hunter looked at her intently. "Why did you leave me?" "Let's sit down. There is no truth in your feet." She sank down on the sofa beside her guest, folding her hands mournfully in her lap. "I would never have given you up if it weren't for circumstances, son," she sobbed. "I had no money to support you. Who was I? A young girl with no education, no steady job. Your father, when he found out I was pregnant, abandoned me. My parents conditioned me to leave the baby at the hospital or get the hell out. What could I do? I was almost as old as you are now. I'm sorry, son." She took his hands in hers and clung to them, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. Hunter felt them dripping down his arms. "I'm very guilty before you. I'll never begrudge you forgiveness." "Oh, come on, you. I understand different circumstances happen. I'm not angry with you. But now that you've found me, we'll never part again, will we?" She looked hopefully at the young man. "Yes, I'll stay with you, if I may." The woman hugged the boy. He wrinkled his nose, smelling the strong odor of booze and unwashed female body. He wistfully remembered the smell of his foster mother, always well-groomed, clean, and trim. "Thank you, dear, for not giving up on me, for finding me. Now I'm not afraid to die, my blood." "Dying? Why do you say that?" "I'm very sick." Camille sighed heavily. "What about you? Is there anything I can do to help? You see, there's no work here. We get by on odd jobs, and my health isn't what it used to be, and I'm old. The employer wants someone younger. We don't even have anything to buy you. So let me go to the store now," suggested Hunter, rising to his feet. "I have money. My darling son." Camille hugged the boy again. "Thank you. We must celebrate your arrival. Bob?" She called her roommate, who had been in the kitchen all this time. "Take the boy to the store. Tell him what to buy for the table." By the time the men returned from the store, the woman had put the room in relative order. A mountain of unwashed dishes disappeared from the kitchen. The floor was washed. An old but clean bedspread appeared on the sofa. The table was shot with oilcloth. "Here we are," Bob announced happily, putting 2 full bags of sundries on the table. "Generous son of yours. Come on, Mother, set the table. We'll celebrate his return to you. I've invited some friends of ours." Quietly, he said in the woman's ear, "Is there a place to wash?" Hunter asked hesitantly. "I'm sweaty and dusty from the road." Bob laughed. "We have a bathhouse, but we ran out of firewood last month, and we have no money to buy it. Tomorrow we'll agree with the neighbors. They'll heat the bathhouse. You'll wash yourself, and if you want, you can wash yourself with cold water, straight from the well. I'll bring a towel right away." Hunter, shivering from the cold, doused himself with water from the well, changed into a fresh t-shirt, and returned to the house. "Sit down, son," invited his mother. "Don't be sorry what God has sent. We serve." Hunter sat at the table, listened to the conversations of adults, and saw how his mother's mood gradually improved, warmed by vodka. "I see that you have fallen into a good family." She started talking. "Lucky then. Don't look at me like this. I used to be beautiful, not drinking. I had a hard life." She cried. "But when you drink, you feel better. And how I longed for you," she said, thinking all the time how my son was doing, and my son lived a good life, and now I'm like this, sick through and through. No job, no health. If it hadn't been for Bob, she'd have waved her hand and drunkenly hiccuped. I'd have died a long time ago. I can't work, and I need money for medicine, you know." "If you could live with your mom for a while," Bob suggested. "You could work, support her. We could get her health back on track." "All right, I can stay late. I'm on my university vacation right now." While they were talking, the guests arrived. "Here are our friends. Welcome to the new arrivals, Bob. This is Camille's son, here to visit." The man and woman said hello to Hunter, sat down at the table, and the conversation was immediately revitalized. "See." Looking proudly at Hunter, Camille boasted, "What a handsome son I have grown up. I wasn't so bad when I was his age, but now." She cried, knocked back a shot of vodka. "Alone, nobody needs me. All hope for my son." "You don't know." The young man looked around at the already pretty tipsy company. "Where can I get a temporary job here?" "If only at the market, as a loader," answered the guest. "There is always a shortage of people there." "I agree. When do I start?" "Come tomorrow. I'll set you up with the market owner. But the work is hard." He hummed, incredulous, looking at the puny boy. "Can you do it?" "I can handle it." "Shall I lie down?" Hunter asked his mother, not boldly. He didn't call her by her name and patronymic. It was awkward, and he couldn't pronounce the word mom. "Oh, what am I, dummy head?" Camille got excited. "Come on, I'll make you a bed. You're tired from the road." She took the young man to the farthest room, where there was nothing else but an old rickety wooden bed and a couple of chairs. The woman made up the bed and left Hunter alone. It took him a long time to fall asleep, reliving over and over the events of the day. Drunken voices came from the kitchen. Then one of the men picked up a guitar and everyone sang. The young man covered his head so he wouldn't hear the noise and soon fell asleep. "Hunter?" The boy woke up to the hoarse voice of the woman he thought was his mother. "It's time for you to go to work, Bob. Hurry up so you can have breakfast." Hunter quickly washed his face, ate the remains of last night's feast, and went with the man to get a job. "Here's your job." A sturdy man in his old age pointed at the crates of fruit. "Now the car will come. The forwarder will say what you need to load. The salary will depend on your The young man worked all day, taking only small breaks. His master praised him. "Well done. I'm pleased with you," he said to the boy in the evening, counting out the bills. "Here, you've earned it." Only Hunter went outside from the market gate when Bob ran up to him. "Hi," sniffing his nose and occasionally looking around, said the man. "So, how was your first day?" "Fine," Hunter replied. "I'm a little tired. Now it would be good to have a snack, because I haven't eaten anything since morning." Yeah, put your arm around his shoulders and said Bob, "I'll be right there. Mom's setting the table." Just then, he looked away again. "Let's go to the store. It's supposed to be paid from the first paycheck," he assured, noticing the young man's perplexed look. "And your mom's head hurts after yesterday. It needs to be fixed. Do you understand? You're a caring son, aren't you? You and I are going to go to the store." The man insistently pulled Hunter toward the store. "We'll buy what we need, and then we'll go home." At home, the company from yesterday was waiting for them. "Oh!" They greeted Hunter with shouts of joy. "Our breadwinner is here. The first paycheck should be properly celebrated," Bob announced, putting a bag full of vodka and snacks on the table. "Well?" impatiently asked his mother. "Show me how much you've earned." She looked greedily at the bills that the young man took out of his jacket pocket. "You'll share it with your mother, right?" "Sure." The boy handed her almost all the money, leaving a small amount for himself. "Here, thanks, of course, why you need money and me," she wept. "I just need to buy some medicine." And again the house was noisy until midnight, until the hosts and guests fell asleep wherever they could, exhausted from drinking and eating. The next day, everything was repeated. Hunter was silent, did not make a remark to his mother, did not try to chase the guests away. He went to work every day, and the company successfully drank and ate his earnings. The young man lost count of the days. More and more often, he was overtaken by memories of that family, but he chased the thoughts away from himself, not allowing himself to regret for a moment the decision to leave home. "Hunter, son," his mother called out to him one evening. He had just fallen into a peaceful sleep, giving rest to his body, tired from physical work. "Get up. Some people are asking for you." "What people?" Reluctantly wiping his sleepy eyes and getting out from under the warm blanket, Hunter asked. "Do I know? Go see for yourself." Camille took a firm step toward the hallway. "Why are you here?" Hunter asked rudely, seeing his foster parents in the hallway. "Hunter." Susan's lips quivered when she saw her son, gaunt, in a laundered t-shirt, with long unwashed hair, barefoot. He was a pitiful sight. "We need to talk. Why don't we go outside?" "Let's talk quietly, without witnesses." "Son?" Camille came out of the kitchen. "Are you all right? Who are these people? What do they want from you?" "I'm fine." answered the young man and went out of the door and into the street. "You came for nothing," he said firmly. "I'll stay here. At least until classes start at the university." "Son." Susan looked at him pleadingly. "I'm not your son." He cut her off abruptly. "You tricked me." "Hunter, you're wrong." The father walked over to his son and took him by the shoulders. "Look me in the eye. We had no intention of deceiving you. We just didn't find the right time to tell you everything, but we're not guilty of anything. There's nothing more to tell. Don't worry about it. I found my real mom, and I'm gonna stay with her and take care of her. You don't like the way she is. What can you do? You can't choose your parents. She needs me. It's my duty to stay by her side." "Hunter." Stammering, Susan said in horror, "Hey, boy." Bob came out on the porch, already pretty drunk. "You need help. Are they trying to take you away? Don't give in. You get the hell out of our house. This is private property." "Hunter." The woman closed her eyes for a moment to endure the drunken man's lunge. "You're wrong to think this woman is your mother. Your mother died as soon as you were born. I know that for a fact. And if by blood I'm not really your mother, then you could call me a milk mother. I'm the one who breastfed you, and she's an imposter." "No way." The young man turned cold, but everything coincided, even the village. "She is just a full namesake of your mother, took advantage of the situation, fooled your head, convinced you that you are her son. We asked the neighbors. She's a long-time deep drinker. Your mom was a very nice woman. You're just like her." "What does that make it?" Hunter asked, shifting his gaze from Susan to Samuel. "Were they using me?" "Unfortunately, it turns out that they did. But why? Son." Camille's head came out of the door again. "We're waiting for you, darling." "Is that true?" The young man was at the woman's side in 2 leaps. "Is what true?" "I don't understand. What are you talking about now?" Camille was stunned. "Is it true that you're not my mom? Did they tell you that?" She nodded at the foster parents. "You won't be able to lean on them." Susan remarked, "I knew his mother. And if I did?" Camille arched her back and looked at Susan with contempt. "That I don't have the right to live like a white man for a while?" She sobbed. "I want someone to take care of me too. At least someone, but Hunter." She patted the young man's cheek. He recoiled sharply from her. He did it so touchingly. I loved being in the role of his mom. I am a very lonely person and need simple motherly happiness. Am I to be despised for that? Well, have you deceived me? Hunter boiled. Just a little bit. Bob made it all up? Yes. And I felt like a mother this month because I have no one. Tears showed in his drunken eyes. We lived almost like a real family. That's mean. What do you know about mean? She swayed. Hunter supported her. I'm a miserable person, and even this month I loved you in my own way. You're a manipulator. Through Hunter. How could you take such a sneaky advantage of my trust? My goodness, how gentle we are. Camille snorted. Hunter, shall we go home? Susan looked at her son pleadingly. Why do you need me? You have your own daughter, and you don't need me. I'm just a nuisance. That's right. Camille clapped her hands. Don't go with them. Stay with us. You're a stranger to them anyway. So what difference does it make where you live? We have fun here. Don't listen to her, son. Susan didn't know what other arguments to make to convince him to go with them. You've always been and will always be family to us. Daddy and I love you very much, and I love you very much too. Finally confessed the young man. Forgive me, I thought I was an extra in the family. Thank you for everything. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened to me. I'm ashamed that I ran away from home without listening to you." Susan opened her arms. Hunter rushed to his mother. "We've been worried sick about you. Nancy's been worried sick about you." Kissing and hugging her son, the woman said. Samuel hugged them, and the three of them stood there until Susan realized what was going on. "What are we waiting for?" "Pack up, son. Let's go home. We don't have to stay here." Hunter quickly packed his things and got into the car. "Hey, boy," Bob shouted after him. "If you decide to run away from home again, know that you're welcome here." It was good to have all the misunderstandings behind him. Susan said, holding her son close to her, "We are together again." Nancy ran out into the hallway as soon as the front door slammed. "Hunter." She threw her arms around her brother's neck. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me the other day. I take it all back. You can hit me, but I'm sorry." "Okay, forget it." Hugging her, the young man said, "No, you say you forgive me." "I really miss you, I really do. I'm insanely ashamed of what I said. You are the best brother ever. I really wanted you to come back. Tell me you've forgiven me. I won't let you go until you do. I'm not angry with you." Hunter replied with restraint, "Forget everything I said to you. I'm very happy to have such a brother. I don't know what bug bit me then." Nancy held her brother's hands and looked guiltily into his eyes. "I've been so bad without you. There hasn't been a day this whole month that I haven't thought about you, scolded myself for my long tongue. And I missed you too, my parents. I'm disgusted at how I've lived all this time. I can't believe it's only been a month. It feels like a year." Guys, their parents hugged each other and looked at them with emotion. How great it is that we are all together again. Let's not remember the bad things. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Strange, who could it be? Opening the door, Samuel asked, "I hope it's not your so-called mom chasing after you." Everyone laughed, waiting to see who they would see when the door opened. "Good afternoon." A stubby, middle-aged man in a dark suit stood on the doorstep. "I'm looking for Hunter." He gave the young man's full name. "It's me." Hunter answered confused. "And who are you?" "I don't know you." "My name is William. I'm a notary and a trustee of your grandfather, Christian." "What grandfather? There must be some mistake." Hunter looked back at his parents in confusion. "I don't have a grandfather by that name." "Dear William," Hunter was stopped by his mother. "Let's go into the living room." "Well, are we keeping the man in the hallway?" Everyone followed Susan into the room. "William?" The woman spoke again. "You said Hunter had a grandfather. Is that correct?" "No mistake. Christian, Hunter's paternal grandfather. He asked me to look for his grandson, which I did. I was also instructed to inform you." He addressed Hunter. "That the will gives you a 2-room apartment in the elite district of the city. I think it's a sin to refuse such an inheritance. Yes, this is the first I've heard of this grandfather." And yet, the man was persistent. "It's true. He lived alone for years, looking for you everywhere. It was only just before he died that he managed to track down his own grandson. Unfortunately, circumstances prevented him from doing so earlier. The search took too long." The boy grinned. "And where is the grandfather himself?" "It would be nice to have a look at him and make sure it's not a joke, because I've already found one false mother. I don't want to be disappointed again." "You won't be able to do that, because Christian died recently before the most important moment in his life, meeting his grandson. Believe me, he would have tracked you down long ago, even hired a private detective for this purpose, but there was too little information about you and your mother. He didn't immediately recognize that he had a grandchild. Moreover, even in the maternity hospital, your traces were lost, and then all sorts of bureaucratic obstacles prevented a quick search for you." "Sad, of course," coldly remarked the young man, "but I don't need anything from a complete stranger. I have people whom I consider my family, and him I have never seen in my life. Let it all stay that way. I do not need anything from him." "Son," his mother stopped him. "Listen to the man, please. We don't know why your grandfather didn't have a chance to contact you before. Surely there must be a reasonable explanation for this. Don't mind him, Mr. Notary. He's a little upset. We are ready to listen to you further. I have come to fulfill Christian's last will and testament." The man looked at Susan with gratitude for the support, and to give you a letter from him. He held out a sealed envelope to Hunter. "I'm glad that, at least now, my client's soul is at rest, and this is the address where you must come to inherit the estate. Do not delay with it. In 6 months we will formalize your inheritance, but already now you can use the apartment. So I'll be expecting you soon. The keys to the apartment are kept with me. And now let me digress." He bowed his head ceremoniously and left, leaving the whole family at a loss. "What are you frozen?" Nancy came out of her reverie for the first time. "Hurry up and get to the table. I've made a lot of food waiting for you. Let's celebrate Hunter's return, leave the serious stuff for tomorrow." "Really?" Mother's cheerful. "It's been so long since we've been together. So much has happened lately. It's been overwhelming." "Hunter?" The father put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Maybe you should be alone. Read your letter. We'll understand. We won't take offense." "No." The young man shook his head, as if shaking off heavy thoughts. "I'll read it later. I want to try Nancy's food first. I hope she's not planning to poison me." "Oh, you!" The girl took a joking swing at her brother. "I tried my best, and you're laughing at me again." "At last we can hear our son again," smiled the father. "Children don't be naughty, as their mothers stop them as children. Indeed, it's time to go to the table. I have much to tell you," said Hunter, when the first cheer of his return had passed. "That's good." Susan rejoiced. "I want to hear how you've been living all this time, how you came across this same false mom. If you could see," she turned to her daughter, "what a shack your brother had to live in. I am deeply ashamed." Nancy was blushing to the roots of her hair. "That I attacked you, Hunter. When I realized what I'd done, I was ready to fall through the ground. I really wanted you back. I mean, we've got the whole place on edge. Right, parents? We even got the police involved. Without them, we never would have known where to find you. Don't apologize." The young man smiled. "I'm also good. Instead of waiting for you, Dad, Mom, and talk, I ran away from home, got angry like a girl, and I'm a grown man, could not curb emotions. It's unforgivable in me." He waved his hand guiltily. "The most important thing is that we are together again." Susan looked fondly at the children, her husband. It was good that everything ended safely. Everyone had learned a life lesson. Now everyone knew everything. There should be no hard feelings. They sat up past midnight, talking, laughing, remembering stories from their childhood. "We're sitting up too late," Mother realized. "It's time," agreed Father. "I'm tired from the road." Soon everyone went to their rooms, and Hunter was alone. He went to the window and stood looking at the distant, dark sky for a long time. Finally, he resolutely grabbed the envelope, opened it, and began to read. "Dear grandson," Christian wrote, "if you are reading this letter, it means that I am no longer alive, and I will never be able to see you. I won't recognize you as you have become. I won't be able to look you openly in the eyes, to justify myself to you for your son, your father, and for myself, to ask for forgiveness. I won't be able to tell you that I've thought of you every minute. Yes, grandson, my heart is full of unspent love and tenderness. How I long to hold you against my chest, to tell you that I persisted in searching and hoping to meet you for all 20 years. Believe me, I would have given everything just to see you, at least once, and then I would not be afraid to accept death. Where were you, grandfather? Hunter swallowed the lump stuck in his throat. Then the news that I was living in a foster home wouldn't have been so shocking to me. I wouldn't have developed a persistent sense of loneliness. He took a deep breath, regaining his composure, and continued reading again. I'm sure you would have understood me, but I guess it was God's will to punish me severely for failing to raise my son properly. He left your mother when he found out she was pregnant. He ran away like a coward, afraid of responsibility, and when he admitted that your mother had a son by him, I immediately rushed to look for her. But it was too late. She died in childbirth, and you were immediately adopted. Nobody wanted to tell me the last name of these people, covering themselves with the secrecy of adoption. I had to stop looking because my son fell into bad company and needed constant supervision. I did not teach him responsibility, did not instill in him an aversion to bad habits, did not immediately realize that except for himself, he loves no one else. He got addicted to drugs and burned out in a couple years. My wife, your grandmother, couldn't bear the grief and left after her son. I was ready to go after them, but the thought of you kept me going. Can't you imagine, grandson, what torture it was? To be alone with bitter guilt. If my son hadn't left Camille, she'd still be alive. I hired a private detective, but he didn't get on your trail right away. The golden time was irretrievably lost. Unfortunately, worries over the death of my wife and son, despair at not being able to find you, undermined my health. I know that I don't have long to live. That's why I'm writing this letter, to have time to say everything I wanted to say. Now that you know the truth about our family, maybe you will find a drop of sympathy in your heart, and someday you will forgive all of us for making you suffer. I pray to God that you will find in your new family the happiness that my foolish son has deprived you of. To help you in any way I can, I'm leaving you a small inheritance. My notary will take care of the arrangements. I hope you won't refuse to accept this gift. That's it, dear grandson. My heart acts for you every day. Farewell without a trace. I believe you will be happier than we are. Hunter tore himself away from the letter. For a long time he sat staring at one point, then he crumpled up the sheet of paper, threw himself on the bed and cried. He heard the door creak. He was inexpressibly ashamed of his weakness, but he could not stop. Tears were pouring from his eyes. Sonny! Susan crouched down beside him on the bed, stroked his head. I'm so sorry you didn't get to meet your grandfather, but if he sent this letter, he loved you. Gradually the sobs dampened. Hunter, wiping his tears, sat down next to his mother. There was no one left of them. Still sobbing, he said. They're all dead, you see. I'm the only one left. The door to the room creaked open again, and Nancy appeared. You are not alone, for you have us, she said. And we love you very much. She hugged her brother, tears welling up in her eyes from the tenderness overflowing her soul. I know. Hunter smiled. I love you all very much, too. Her daughter was followed into the room by her father. But are you going to shed tears here? Hunter, it turns out, is a very desirable groom. He smiled. Now that you have your own apartment, I hope you don't want to move out immediately. We wouldn't like that very much. All three of them looked at the boy expectantly. No. Hunter smiled, looking at them warmly. You are my closest people, my real family, and I don't need another.